Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. Where was my wife? Why wasn't she home yet? What was keeping her so long? Had she been seeing her fancy man behind my back? The thought of this made my stomach recoil in disgust. Traitor were the words that screamed out in my mind. Traitor! I despise disloyalty of any kind, and nothing is more insulting than thinking that your wife might be doing the dirty on you. My beautiful wife, with some other man. I couldn't even bear to think about it, and if some other man was touching my wife, I'd kill him myself, wring his neck like a chicken, and hear him cry out for mercy, but no mercy would come his way. For if someone dares lay a finger on my wife, they won't be waking up in the morning to face another day. I will see to it that they are permanently expunged from the face of this earth, like a firefly that loses its light. I had no evidence, of course, of my wife seeing someone else, no evidence at all. But sometimes you have an instinctive, deep, guttural, nagging feeling about these things, don't you? My wife thought I was so unobservant, so naively ignorant, that I didn't even notice the little things going on under my roof. But I'm not stupid. I've got eyes, you know, along with brains. I've learnt over the years to always listen to the gut. The gut never lies to you, you know. It's like an inward compass. I've noticed the long drawn-out sighs my wife gives me when I talk about my day at work, as if I'm boring her half to death. I'm very sorry if my job as a real estate agent bores her so much. I try to talk about my day, and then she just yawns, as if everything that comes out of my mouth is completely uninspiring. It's not true, of course. In my line of work I meet very interesting people, and one day is never the same as the next. So I have a lot of fascinating things to talk about. But whatever I share with my wife, Carol, well, it appears to just bore her. She'll say something so predictable like, "That's nice. How interesting." But in the dispassionate, lukewarm tone of voice, if you know what I mean, that you would likely use if you were watching paint dry. When I ask my wife about her day, of course, it's completely different. She's a lot more forthcoming. Because when we're talking about her, it's as if her life is so much more riveting than mine is. My wife, Carol, works at an antique shop in town for a man called Mr. Travis Mason. She will garrulously talk about her day quite happily, for she loves her job, and I mean that quite literally. I wouldn't say I love my job as a real estate agent. At the best of times it can be laboriously punishing, and some of the taxing people you tend to meet can be exasperating at the very best of times, especially when they give you the distinct impression they're about to bite the bullet and put in a generous offer on a property. and then you never hear from the likes of them ever again. Those kind of frustrating people that goof around, well, they annoy me the most. My wife, on the other hand, loves her job. She's passionate about antiques. She's much more old-fashioned and individualistic than the average woman. She's made no secret of the fact that she feels she belongs in that antique shop, like all the ancient relics and the old furniture, and that she'd have been better suited living in another time. And you know what? I think she might be right about that. By all accounts, I've never been able to relate to my wife's perennial fascination for all things old and passé. Some of the bygone relics she brings home from that antique shop, stuff that she's paid for out of her wages, to add to her burgeoning collection of period pieces. Well, let's just say they are dust collectors. I'm an unpretentious minimalist. I've always been that way. I'm a no-frills kind of guy, so I abhor clutter of any kind. But my wife Carol loves all kinds of dated, old-fangled knickknacks, and gets very excited when something new comes into the antique store that has an interesting history behind it. For a while I wondered if my wife was having an affair with Travis Mason, the owner of the antique shop, but he's 20 years her senior. And surely no woman in her right mind would be remotely interested in someone that could potentially be old enough to be their father. Although, of course, there are exceptions to that rule. Travis Mason is a tall, scrawny man. He looks like a lobster that has been boiled in hot water for far too long, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. He's a little shriveled. He's all legs and arms all over the place, spindly, you could say. His face always seems to look a bright red colour, as if he's permanently blushing. He has deep-set hooded eyes. They're very dark, you know, and a very unfortunate Roman nose that dominates his entire face. I've since learnt, of course, that a lot of women seem to love men with interesting noses. There is no way on God's earth my wife would be interested in the likes of Travis Mason, surely, unless she's got a screw loose. When I compare the man to myself, there really is no contest at all. Even if I say so myself, I am reasonably good-looking, and I'm in pretty good shape because I look after myself very well. So I'm sure that Carol is not going to fall for the likes of Travis Mason, unless she really is as blind as a bat, and doesn't appreciate what she's got at home. Travis Mason is happily married, as far as I know, to his wife Polly. So I'm pretty sure he and my wife are just very good friends that work together. But I cannot afford to take anything for granted, as stranger things have happened. Look at the movies. Princesses have been able to fall for ugly ogres, so it wouldn't be the first time this has happened. I think my wife likes Travis Mason more than she ever liked me, and that makes my blood boil. Not that I believe for a second she likes him on a romantic capacity, but I'm not ruling that out, well, not yet. To all intensive purposes, whenever my wife talks about Travis, her face lights up like a Christmas tree, and she begins to laugh. She claims Travis has a great sense of humour. I've never made my wife laugh like that, so the fact that some other man can have her cramping up with laughter makes me feel exceedingly annoyed. Believe me, there's nothing remotely funny about Travis Mason, apart from the eccentric, anomalous way he dresses, which in my opinion is absolutely hilarious. Who does the man think he is? He wears a top hat and tails along with a waistcoat every day to work, and looks like he stepped out of a menswear catalogue from the 1800s. I've never seen someone in this day and age dressed like that before. When I first met Travis Mason, I asked him if he was going to a party where he was expected to dress from another time, and Travis told me, "No, this is the way I dress all the time." I remember being completely astounded. I asked him if he was pulling my leg. He looked at me soberly and said, "No, I'm not." I then asked him why he dressed the way he did, and he said, "I like to dress like a gentleman, And these days men's clothes are not very stylish or smart, are they? I didn't know what to say to that. At the time I was wearing a scruffy pair of white shorts and a navy blue golfing shirt. And I must admit, in his unorthodox company, I felt extremely underdressed. Apparently folks around this part of Virginia think the man is the epitome of sartorial elegance. Are you kidding me? I'd like to know what some of these folk are smoking, because they're seriously delusional if you ask me. My wife thinks that Travis's quirky eccentricities are delightful. She's always been drawn to unconventional people like that, which I've never been able to understand. When I first met my wife's parents, they stared at me with bug eyes, as if they thought I was the last kind of person they expected Carol to be engaged to. It was her mother that finally said, "Do forgive me, Hamish, but you're not what we expected at all. When Carol told us she was bringing her new fiancé home to meet us, well, I thought you'd be an artist, a musician, a singer, or even a poet. All Carol's previous boyfriends were so much more unorthodox than you are. Many didn't even have permanent careers, you know. They were chasing after their dreams, so they had stars in their eyes, if you know what I mean. But you, Hamish, are much more put together than the men that Carol would normally choose to date. And you have a career as an estate agent, too. Things are definitely looking up for our girl. It seems that Carol has finally gained some common sense along the way." "Oh, yes, they welcomed me into the family. But I always had this sneaky, rather suspicious feeling that they were judging me, because I could see Carol's mother giving me rather wary looks, and I could pick up her body language very easily. And I rather suspect she didn't think our relationship would last a minute, let alone as long as it has. I think she rather thought our marriage would fold after the first year of married life together. I know that well, because I saw that look in her eyes, and the eyes testify to an awful lot, you know, even when the person in question withholds their true feelings from you. Before Carol and I got married, I overheard her mother saying to Carol, 'But are you sure, love, that Hamish is right for you?' Carol got very defensive on my account and said, 'Of course he is, Mum. I love him.' 'Well, I'm just worried, love, that's all,' her mother said. 'So is your father. It's just Hamish is not your usual type. I remember when you were a little girl, for example, every time we went to that Italian restaurant down the road, you would order the same pizza every single time without fail. You wouldn't even look at the menu. You wouldn't even try anything different, because you've always been set in your ways. And one time you ordered, pasta and meatballs. But you never went back to pasta and meatballs again. You returned to your pizza, because that was your traditional choice. I worry that you might not find Hamish right for you in the end.' 'Oh, Mum, don't be ridiculous. Hamish isn't a pizza. I mean, just because I'm choosing someone different to my past boyfriends, is it such a big deal?' 'No, I suppose it's not,' her mother had said. 'But personally, I did think you'd end up with a younger version of Travis at the antique shop. Now, he'd be your type, wouldn't he? He's such a dashing man. You do have to admit that.' 'But Travis is married, Mum. And yes, he's got a great sense of humour, and I thoroughly enjoy his company. But the generation gap between us is far too large, so it would never work. People think age doesn't matter, but in my experience it really does.' 'But of course I understand that, dear. But why the hurry to get married all of a sudden? Maybe some mad poet will come along that will tick all the boxes for you. Why don't you wait a little longer?' 'Mum, I'd like to remind you, I'm 33 years old. My biological clock is ticking whether you like it or not. You know me. I want to have a baby. I'm desperate to start a family. And surely you want to be a grandmother. And I just don't want to wait. I really don't. And yes, I do love Hamish. He may not be perfect, but he's good enough for me." Hearing that tore at my heartstrings. Good enough for her? Is that how my wife really saw me? Or was she just humouring her mother? I hope the latter was the case, because I knew I was a whole lot better than all my wife's completely useless, gormless ex-boyfriends, who had dreams and aspirations that they could never reach. By contrast, I was an accomplished man, bringing in substantial money as an estate agent. I could offer my wife safety and security, and I could offer her so much more than those other bums she dated in the past. "Well, as long as you know what you're doing, love, that's all me and your father care about," I heard Carol's mother say. "Why do I get the feeling you don't like Hamish?" my wife asked her mother. "It's not that I don't like him, Carol, love. Please don't put words into my mouth. I just think he may be a wee bit intense for you, that's all. The proprietorial way he looks at you, I do find rather unsettling. Your father noticed it too, and it was a concern for him." "What do you mean by the way he looks at me, Mum? What are you talking about?" "Well, like he wants to own you, like you're his property. The eye candy he wants on his arm, so everywhere he goes people will say, 'Look at Hamish. He really does have a stunning woman on his arm.' Some men are like that, you know. Women become like an accessory to them. I get the impression image is very important to Hamish, and I think he's got a monumental ego. The moment I asked him about his career, he started boasting a great deal about the elite clientele he served over the years. He did a certain amount of name-dropping, I might add. It came across to me as extremely arrogant and conceited, if you don't mind my saying so, Carol. I find that self-important grandiosity very distasteful, that's all." "Oh, Mum, of course he's got an ego. Most men do. But I love him nevertheless." "Well, good for you, love. Don't listen to your old mother. I mean, what do I know about people's relationships? As I was saying, as long as you're happy, that's all that matters to me and your father. How did you say you met him again?" "I met him in a dentist reception." "Good Lord, you met him at the dentist? That's got to be the most unromantic place in the entire world to meet your future spouse. But I guess you can't have everything, can you?" "Well, it could have been worse," my wife said. "I could have met him collecting garbage." I heard my wife's mother laughing, and then I quickly scurried away, knowing well I didn't want to be caught eavesdropping. I knew Carol's mother was wary of me, but for the sake of her daughter she was very sweet towards me, having realized that I was going to be a significant part of Carol's life from now on. But I knew she was bitterly disappointed that her daughter was not marrying an arty type, which I thought was ridiculous. I mean, I was such an eligible bachelor. Yet she wanted her daughter to marry an unreliable type of person, when I could give her a high standard of living, which would mean she wanted for nothing. Why did Mrs. Maxwell not want stability and security for her daughter? Instead, she'd have liked her daughter to marry a weirdly eccentric individual, such as the likes of Travis Mason. So yes, I knew my in-laws were not exactly ecstatic about their daughter falling for me, but what did I care about that anyway? I do think what my wife revealed in her rather unfortunate conversation with her mother, which was quite revelatory, I have to say, that if there wasn't such a large generation gap between her and Travis Mason, he might have been ideal for her. Well, that had not been easy listening to hear, let me tell you. But at least that conversation confirmed to me that my wife couldn't possibly be having an affair with Travis Mason. Or could she? Could I be deluding myself? People have been known to change their minds over matters concerning the heart. "I think Travis Mason is so charming," she told me once. "He's got a fabulous sense of humour, you know. And yes, I know he's wildly eccentric, but it's rather lovely walking into an antique shop, don't you think, and being served by a dealer who looks like an antique himself. And I mean that as a compliment. I can't imagine Travis wearing modern-day clothes. They absolutely wouldn't suit him. He's such a real gentleman, and everybody loves him. When old ladies come into the antique shop, he charms the socks off them. They all love him to bits." "The man is completely insane. Totally bonkers," I had said disapprovingly, feeling a prickle of jealousy rising up in my chest. Why he dresses like that in this day and age, I don't understand. If he wants to dress in 1800s clothes, why doesn't he take a time machine and go back to the 1800s? Carol had rolled her eyes at me in her usual scathing manner. "Why are you being so mean, Hamish? Anyone would think you were jealous of Travis Mason." "I'm not jealous of the man," I had said guardedly. "Are you kidding me? Do you really think I want to look like that man? He's a joke, an absolute joke. He looks like a boiled lobster. He's all legs and arms." "He's not a joke," my wife had said defensively. "Travis is the perfect gentleman. And for the record, everyone who gets to know him likes him a lot. You just haven't given him a chance. My mother thinks he's absolutely wonderful. And he certainly doesn't look like a lobster. I don't know where you got that idea from." "He's a tall man with long legs and arms, and what's wrong with that? I think his long body shape only accentuates the clothes he wears. If he had a very massive build, he'd burst out of those clothes, and they wouldn't do anything for him. It would hardly be attractive." "So you fancy him? Is that it?" I said accusingly. I could feel the green-eyed monster once again rearing up its ugly head, but I couldn't help it, could I? It hurt me to the quick to see my wife talking about another man with so much unabashful praise. I know for a fact she doesn't talk about me in the same extravagantly effusive way. So yes, I'm jealous, of course I am. Even though I would put money on the fact that my wife is not having an affair with Travis. When it comes to physical appearances, Travis can't hold a candle to me. I'm sorry, but he can't. But then again, maybe my wife doesn't care about physical attraction. Maybe she's one of those soulful individuals that only looks inward and considers people such as myself, who place an enormous weight on outer appearances, as being extremely shallow and frivolously facile. Over the last couple of years, I have very sadly observed the way my wife has pulled away from me when I've tried to put my arms around her. I've also noticed the pillow in our bed. She slipped between the two of us at night, rather like a dividing wall that cannot be crossed when we go to bed at night. Every time I lean over to touch my wife, she tells me she's got a pounding headache. "Not tonight," she says, and then she turns away from me like a gush of Siberian Arctic air that is so chillingly glacial it can almost burn you. She's been pushing me away like that for a very long time, and every time I dare to touch her, she suddenly has that splitting headache all over again. So I've begun to feel very lonely in my life with her, as her indifference towards me has been close to intolerable, you could say. I've searched through all her things for evidence of her treacherous infidelity, but I found nothing, apart from a card for a psychologist. When I saw it, I got quite the shock, I have to say. I was completely confounded. In truth, I was wondering if my wife was seeing this psychologist, on a romantic basis, of course. And if she was seeing him, then he was a dead man, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, why would my wife be seeing a psychologist, I ask you? What would she possibly have to talk about? How miserable she is in her marriage with me, perhaps. I hope she hasn't got the audacity to talk about our private life to a complete stranger. But let's just say I wouldn't put anything past my wife these days. It would seem my wife Carol has absolutely no scruples. If that wasn't bad enough, I noticed that she had prized a card for an attorney's office in the corner of her purse. Now, when I saw that, I was seething, so much so that my blood was boiling like sugar and melted butter in a piping hot cauldron. Once again, I was wondering if she was seeing this attorney on a romantic basis, where her fleeting visits to his office were likely to be nefarious by nature. When I saw that card clandestinely squirreled away like that in her wallet, I was like a bear with a sore head, I really was. I do have an inclination to erupt when I'm angry. My mother used to say when I was growing up that my volatile, rather explosive temper was a major problem for me, that I needed to control. It was true, of course. I could scare people away when I got enraged. Let's just say when I was a junior and senior high, I was involved in multiple fights and disputes with people. For if anyone dared to suggest I was wrong about something, I'd wage war against them, and it was never pretty. I've broken noses before, and kicked out teeth, but those people caught up in the crossfire of my wrath deserved everything they got. People wisely avoided me, and that's what I wanted them to do, because they knew that winding me up the wrong way was not a good idea, because you didn't mess with the likes of someone like me, and over the years I've earned a lot of respect from people, the kind of respect my wife has failed to show me for a very long time. I was trembling as I read the attorney's card in my hand, but I quickly replaced it in my wife's purse when I heard the shower in the bathroom turning off, and my wife's naked feet padding over the bathroom floor as she reached for a fluffy white towel to dry herself with from the railing. The last thing I wanted was Carol seeing me snooping around in her purse, as digging around in her private stuff is a boundary I'm not allowed to cross. But I have to keep tabs on my wife. I have to know what she's up to, so that I'm never taken off guard. I mean, if you're a knight living in an ivory castle, you ensure all the spies working for your kingdom keep a vigilant, very discerning eye on the enemy at all times. So if they launch an attack on you, you're not taken down unaware. I needed to do exactly the same thing when it came to my wife, because right now she appeared to be the enemy. I was still shuddering with horror from the after effects of seeing that solicitor's card in my wife's wallet. It was evidence of her betrayal. When my wife came out of the bathroom with a towel draped around her hair and around her torso, she gave me a rather funny look. Not that that's very unusual these days. "What's the matter?" she asked me, standing in the doorway, as steam from the bath rose out of her body, like the vapour from a kettle. Her face was squeaky clean, without a stitch of makeup on, and I'd never seen her look more beautiful. "You look as if you've seen a ghost," she said to me. "Oh, don't mind me," I lied. "I just remember I have a client this morning. I clean forgot about it." "You forgetting something, Hamish?" said my wife, raising a cynical brow, as if she didn't believe it for a second. "You do surprise me. You're the shrewdest man I know." "I have a phone call to make," I said, leaving the room, as I pulled the cell phone out of my pocket, to pull off this convincing charade, for I had no intention of phoning anyone at all. I was still suffering from the trauma of seeing that attorney's card in my wife's purse. I couldn't get over it. It was so hard to conceal my anger, that was volcanic in its intensity. I needed an immediate release to diffuse it, or I'd probably drive myself mad and kick holes in every dividing wall on our property. I ambled over to the entrance hall, and with my big extended boot, I took aim at Carol's favourite antique vase on the hall table, and successfully kicked it over, off its pedestal, so to speak. It shattered into hundreds of pieces, as the whole vase came crashing down onto the terracotta flooring. At the time, this mindless act of vandalism gave me a great deal of pleasure. I wanted to cause my wife pain. I wanted to hurt her like she was hurting me. I was being haunted by the attorney's card in my wife's wallet. It made me want to tear my hair out in frustration, but I resisted the temptation, as I've always prided myself in having a full head of hair, and losing any of it is not an option for me, as I don't think I would suit being bald. "What the hell happened here?" asked my wife suddenly, as she appeared in the hallway. She had got dressed so very quickly. She had her purse slung over her shoulders, and some car keys that were dangling in her hands. "I heard a mighty crash. Oh my God! I don't believe it! Look what you've done, Hamish! You've broken my very best vase!" My wife was frozen to the spot for a moment, as she stared down at the floor in horror, at the Ming vase that was scattered liberally all over the floor. "Oh, that," I said, trying desperately to mask an internal smile. "I just accidentally bumped into it when I walked past the hall table, when I was looking for my car keys, that's all. Very sorry, love."
"You accidentally bumped into the Ming vase? Are you really that clumsy, Hamish?"
said my wife, giving me an indignant glare. "Oh, that," I said, trying desperately to mask the internal smile. "I accidentally bumped into it when I walked past the hall table, when I was looking for my car keys. Sorry about that, love."
"You accidentally bumped into the Ming vase? Are you really that clumsy, Hamish? I mean, you're like a bull in a china shop. Thank God you don't work where I do. You'd break absolutely everything,"
said my wife, giving me an indignant glare. "Sorry, love, but the vase was in an awkward position on the table. I must have brushed past it when I was looking for my car keys. I can't help it that it just crashed over onto the floor like that."
"I wish you'd be more careful, Hamish. I really do,"
said my wife, putting her purse down on the entrance hall table and getting down on her hands and knees to retrieve all the pieces of broken china that was like shrapnel on the floor. There were tears in my wife's eyes, and that made me feel extremely satisfied. Good. I was hurting her, as she had hurt me. She deserved this.
"This was a Ming vase, Hamish. Do you have any idea how valuable it was? I saved up for months to be able to afford to buy this from the antique shop. I knew I had to have it. And now you've destroyed it. Look what you've done. I'm so devastated about this. I really am. You have no idea how attached I was to this vase."
"Too bad, love," I said with no empathy in my voice, for I had none. "Besides anything else, that stupid vase was just a big dust collector, wasn't it? You should be more careful, love, when you display your stuff like that. I mean, I rush through the entrance hall all the time, in all kinds of outrageous weather. Is it any wonder that the Ming vase met a tragic end like this? It was invariably going to happen at some point. The trouble is you have far too many bits of bric-a-brac in this house. Is it any surprise that they end up broken?"
"I don't think you're that clumsy, Hamish,"
said my wife, looking at me through narrowing eyes that conveyed her deep suspicion. And these days that look was complemented by an intense look of dislike, as if my wife really didn't like me very much these days. But if she was going to play hardball with me, I was not going to be a soft touch for her.
"If I didn't know any better,"
Carol continued,
"I'd say you broke the vase deliberately, Hamish. You probably hate it, don't you? You made no secret of the fact that you hold my fascination for antiques with contemptuous opprobrium. If you had your way, everything in this house of owls would be minimalistic."
"I don't know what you're talking about, love," I said, giving her a charming smile that did not meet my eyes and was far from genuine, but I don't think it fooled her for a second. Once my wife had picked up the broken piece of the Ming vase, she threw them into the waste paper basket and let out an exasperated sigh, rather like a mother does after picking up sweeties that her child has dropped all over the floor in a fitful rage. My wife gave me a penetrating stare.
"I don't know what's wrong with you these days, Hamish, but I think you seem to be nursing a grudge against me. Right, I better be off,"
she said, glancing down at her watch.
"Goodness gracious, it's already 9:10. I'm running late. I should be at the antique store already. I'm opening up today for Travis Mason. Have a nice day, Hamish,"
she said to me. "You too, love. Have a good day," I said, leaning forward to kiss my wife on the cheek. But she brushed me away, as if I was an antagonistic mosquito. I watched my wife marching out of the house, making her way to her red Peugeot that was parked in our garage. She looked immaculate as usual, her golden blonde hair brushed away from her face in a ponytail. My wife was wearing a very beguiling dress, with a skinny red belt and a pair of matching red shoes. And once again I asked myself, who is she dressing up for? Who is she trying to impress? And that red lipstick she was wearing rarely brought out the blue colour of her eyes. And I hated the fact that these days she seemed to be making an extra effort with her appearance. Who was she secretly trying to impress, I wondered? The green-eyed monster reared up its ugly head, as I felt my whole body spasm in complete disgust. I remember once when those beautiful blue eyes of my wife's had looked at me with so much tenderness, so much warmth, but those eyes never looked tender towards me any more. It was like they'd frosted over, in contempt, as if my wife had become like an Arctic ice queen. As I thought about the attorney's card, because I couldn't think of anything else, I began to panic, as a horrifying thought began to mushroom in my mind, spiralling out of control, like an infestation of lice on the scalp. Was my wife seeing an attorney because she was about to serve me with divorce papers? I don't think so. I can't allow this to happen. I do not want a divorce, and I will not allow my wife to walk away from me. We made a promise when we married until death us do part, and that's the way it'll be for us. I thought everything about our marriage was perfect, until it wasn't anymore, until my wife suddenly decided she wasn't happy. Why can't Carol understand that life isn't always a bowl of cherries? When you get married, you're going to go through ups and downs. But she has this idealistic, almost childlike fantasy about marriage, like it's in the fairy tales that you listen to when you're a child, when the prince meets the princess, and then everything in their lives is rosy forever and ever, amen. But real life, it doesn't work like that, does it? But try telling that to someone as whimsically naive and as foolish as my wife is. Because yes, my unsophisticated, very ingenuous wife is extremely callow, like a juvenile green sapling that has never grown to full maturity. I met my wife 10 years ago, actually. Our first meeting was hardly what you would call a romantic rendezvous. I met Carol in the most unromantic of places, and that was the dentist's office, would you believe? I remember I'd gone off to the gentleman's room at the dental surgery. I could have only been gone for less than a minute, but when I returned, my wife was sitting on my seat, and I felt unduly annoyed about this, for I had left an open magazine on the seat to specify it was already taken. But she had chosen to take that specific seat, which was exceedingly presumptuous of her, and things like that can really annoy me. I do remember seeing her sitting there and feeling really peeved. I told her, "Excuse me, that's my seat that you're sitting on." My wife looked up at me and said, "Not any more, it's not." And I recall her blue eyes looking at me quite defiantly, almost as if butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. I glared at her rather furiously and told her, "I marked the seat with an open magazine. Isn't it obvious the seat was taken? Like when people put their luggage on a seat in a train. You don't move it, do you? I like that seat. It's next to the fish tank, and I enjoy watching the fish when I come to the dentist's office. I always sit in that seat. I came here early today in order to get it. I don't like dental procedures, and the fish relax me."
Well, that's why I like the seat too. I find the fish relax me as well. When I came into the reception, there was a magazine on the seat, not a human being. If you're looking for the magazine you were reading, it's on the coffee table over there on the top of that pile, she said. I put it back where it belongs. But I don't know why you'd want to read a woman's health magazine anyway, she said, giving me the once-over and appearing to smirk at me. Unless, of course, you have issues with high estrogen levels. This woman was trying to rile me up by pressing my buttons, trying to feminize me, but it was never going to work. I remember going and sitting in the chair opposite hers and glaring at her contemptuously. I thought at the time what a nasty piece of work she really was, but another part of me was rather intrigued and fascinated by this fiery woman. I wanted to get to know her better, as I guess I've always rather liked a challenge. And there can be something wildly attractive about a woman giving you a hard time. I then walked over to the seat next to hers and sat down, a hair's breadth away from her.
because I really wanted to annoy her. I guess being so close to her, I certainly made her feel uncomfortable. So my little plan worked rather brilliantly. She shifted rather awkwardly in her seat and tried desperately to ignore me. As being so close to her, our coats were practically touching, and I could hear her breathing increase, and was clandestinely rather pleased by that, as clearly I was unsettling her, and maybe she'd get up and walk away, and I'd finally get my seat back. My wife's big blue eyes were staring at the fish swimming around the tank. I'm sure she was thinking I was a creep, and she wished to God I would just go away. But I wasn't going anywhere, and I was taking a great deal of pleasure in intensifying her discomfort. I decided to turn on the charm, as it's always worked for me. "I'm sorry we got off on the wrong start," I said apologetically. I was speaking to the back of my wife's head at this point. "You can't keep ignoring me and watching the fish, because I'm right next to you," I said. "I'm very well aware of that," she said to me in a muted murmur. "I can feel you breathing on me, and it's disgusting. And I know why you're doing this. You're trying to intimidate me, aren't you, so that I'll give up my chair to you. But it's not going to happen, and your plan isn't going to work." "I did want you to feel uncomfortable," I admitted. "But you must understand, at the moment I'm like a bear with a sore head. I've got an abscess on one of my teeth, so I'm decidedly grumpy. I'm sure you can forgive me for that. The name is Hamish Buckler, by the way," I said, extending my hand towards her. When she finally turned around to look at me, with those magnificent piercing blue eyes of hers, I noticed there was no humour in them, only contemptuous disgust, as if she thought I was nothing worse than a cockroach that she would really like to squash under her boot. The young woman didn't shake my hand. She continued to glare at me. "Why don't you go away and leave me the hell alone? There are lots of chairs in this surgery. Why don't you sit on one of them? Instead, you've chosen to sit right next to me, because you deliberately want to annoy me. Isn't that right? You're pissed because you believe I took your chair from you, when it wasn't your chair to take in the first place. Your behaviour is so childish. I've never known a man to behave like this before. It's absolutely ridiculous." "You did take my chair," I reminded her. "But the seat next to yours is a good spot to watch the fishes, is it not?" "So is the seat further away from here," said my wife, pointing to another seat. "You want me to move away from my seat, which is deliberately why you've chosen to sit next to me like this. Because you want to intimidate me. I know what your kind is like. But I've got news for you. I'm not going to budge, not for a second. I refuse to be bullied by someone." "I'm not asking you to budge. Didn't you hear a word I just said? I told you I have an abscess on one of my teeth. Do you have any idea how painful that is? If I'm being snappy, can you blame me for that? Tooth pain is the worst pain there is. It's worse than childbirth, I'm told. I haven't slept for 3 days now. I've been in so much pain. I made the appointment to see the dentist 3 days ago, and they could only see me now, and the delay has been absolutely agonizing. It got so bad I thought about shooting myself in the head, just to put myself out of my misery. I've been using everything at my disposal, from clove oil to painkillers. You can't imagine how insufferable this pain has been." I observed for a brief moment, in my wife's defiant blue eyes, a sliver of compassion. "You're right," she nodded. "I'll give you that. Tooth pain is the worst there is, but it still doesn't excuse you being so rude towards me, or choosing to sit on top of me like this, to make me feel uncomfortable, just because you wanted my seat. I'd also appreciate it if you weren't breathing down my neck. It's not nice smelling somebody else's breath, you know, even if yours does smell of mint toothpaste." I took the hint, being the gentleman that I am, moved down a couple of seats, but my focus remained on my wife. I remember the receptionist looking up at my wife almost sympathetically, as if she felt my wife was being accosted by a stranger in reception. "Are you all right, Miss Maxwell?" she said, looking up at my wife from her computer. When I heard my wife being addressed as Miss, I was a very happy man. Ah, so this lovely woman was not married. That was great news. Maybe if I turned up the charm offensive, she might just be interested in me. I didn't usually have problems in getting women to like me. But this woman I had just met in the dental surgery, I knew I wanted to get to know her a whole lot better. I was very attracted to the way she'd stood up to me and given me a hard time.
Don't worry about me, Deborah. I'm doing just fine,
said my wife.
Is my appointment next?
She asked, looking down at her watch. That's right. You are next, said the woman. She was in her early 60s. Was very elegantly attired and well presented, I have to admit.
Look, Deborah, I'm only having a scaling and a polish. But this gentleman over here... Sorry, what's your name?
She asked me again, even though I had only just introduced myself to her as Hamish Buckler. But she'd been quick to forget. Maybe I hadn't made such a good impression on her after all. I'm Hamish Buckler, I reminded her.
Well, this man, Hamish Buckler, well, he's in desperate pain, I believe. He's got an abscess on his tooth, Deborah. I'm quite happy to trade places with him, because I don't need to be in that kind of rush. I'll go off and do a bit of shopping and come back. I'll take over his appointment, and he can have mine.
Are you sure you want to do this? I asked, looking at this woman gratefully, unable to believe this random act of kindness coming from her, because it was true. I was in agonizing pain. I had been decidedly angry with this woman for taking my seat, and we hadn't exactly been all that nice to each other, but she appeared willing to let me take her appointment from her, because she fully appreciated the pain that I was going through, and that was a very generous thing for her to do. I didn't know what Miss Maxwell's name was, but when she left the surgery for an hour or so, in order to go shopping, I gave the woman in reception a note to give Miss Maxwell. Please, will you give it to Miss Maxwell, I asked, when she comes back, just in case I miss her and don't have an opportunity to thank her for what she's done for me. The woman in reception, well, her eyes twinkled a little, and she said, Of course I'll do that for you, Mr. Butler. I'm delighted to help. It was very kind of Miss Maxwell to trade places with you like that. She's a very sweet, generous young lady, you know, but she knows a thing or two about tooth pain. She had a root canal once, and that was not an easy procedure for her to endure. She's been coming to Mr. Holmes's practice since she was a little girl, you know, so I've known her for a very long time. I've worked in the surgery for over 20 years, you know. Is that right? I said. I left a note with the receptionist that read, Miss Maxwell, it was good to meet you. I don't know your full name, but you kindly changed places with me in the dental queue because of my unfortunate abscess. I'm grateful for your generosity in this regard. Sorry I was rather rude and offensive earlier on, and got angry with you for taking my chair next to the fish tank. You're right, I had no business in doing that. I would really appreciate you giving me a call. I would like to take you out for dinner sometime, by way of saying thank you. Yours, kindly, Hamish Butler. A week passed, and I really didn't think I'd hear from my wife again. And then just when I'd given up on hearing from her, the cell phone rang, and a female voice on the other end said,
Hello, is that Hamish?
Speaking. Who is this? I asked.
It's Carol speaking.
Carol who? I asked. You must excuse me, but I don't exactly know any Carols.
Have you forgotten me already?
Said the teasing voice.
I'm Carol Maxwell, the woman that changed places with you in the queue at the dentist's office to relieve you of the pain you were experiencing from your abscess. I decided to play the part of the Good Samaritan. Not that you deserved it, of course. I'm surprised I'm so easy to forget. I did steal your seat after all, and by all accounts that was a big deal for you, because if you remember, we had quite a spat together over that.
Is it really you? I asked her. I thought you'd never phone me back. I can't believe you did. I'm so glad you called.
To tell you the truth, Hamish, I was doubtful whether I should phone you at all, because you were so infuriatingly offensive towards me in the dental surgery. But then I persuaded myself that given that physical pain that you were experiencing was so intolerable, that I should forgive you. I know a thing or two about tooth pain, you see. I've had an agonizing root canal treatment myself, and let's just say I went to hell and back. So tooth pain is not something that can be sniffed at, and it's certainly not for the faint of heart. When my sister was giving birth about 2 years ago, I believe it was, I was at her side through the delivery. She called me every foul name you can think of under the sun, and more besides. And if I can forgive her for those unfortunate words that she spilt out to me, I can forgive anyone that's insulted me. And you're at the top of that list, I have to say.
You're a very kind, generous and forgiving woman, Carol, and I'm glad to hear you say this. I was a jerk to you, and I don't deserve to be forgiven. But I was in a bad way that day, and pain can bring the very worst out in a man.
Well, then it's a good job that women are the ones that have babies and not men, don't you think? That's what I always say. I think that women have a higher pain threshold than men do. And I imagine if men had to have babies, we'd have a massive population problem, because men simply wouldn't want to fall pregnant, so there wouldn't be any children left in the world.
I chuckled. You're right about that, Carol. I hope you don't mind me calling you Carol.
But of course you call me Carol. I hope I can call you Hamish.
I'd like that very much. Let's just say, Carol, it wouldn't be pretty if men carried babies to full term. So it's a good thing that we don't, or the human race would likely be extinct.
You're right about that. I rather suspect it would. Tell me, Hamish, how are you feeling?
She asked me teasingly.
Is the bear with the sore head a little less grumpy, perhaps?
I'm a lot less grumpy. I'm feeling marvellous now. No more pain. So how about dinner tomorrow night, Carol? Are you up for it? Or is the idea of spending an evening with a prize jerk that you met at the dental surgery pretty close to intolerable?
No, it isn't. Of course it isn't. It sounds perfectly lovely. Where shall I meet you, Hamish? I'd rather not be picked up on our first date, if you don't mind. It's one of my ground rules, you see. So that if I'm not happy on a date, I can walk away and drive myself straight back home. I like to do it that way. It makes perfect sense to me.
Well, I hope it doesn't come to that, and I very much doubt in my good company it will. Anyway, I'll be on my best behaviour tonight.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, Hamish,
said Carol with a giggle. How about we meet at that lovely vintage Italian restaurant in town? I'm sure you must know the one. It's got quite a good reputation. It has white climbing roses growing around the arch entranceway. You know the one.
Oh, you mean La Torramento? Oh, I love the place. It's my favourite Italian restaurant. The food there is to die for. I understand the place is run by a lovely Italian couple. They came to Virginia from Florence in the 1990s, I believe. Everything on the menu is authentic Italian. So I'm looking forward to it. See you at 7.
I do vividly remember when I walked into La Torramento with a single rose in my hand. My heart was flapping around wildly in my chest in eager anticipation of this date. The last time I'd felt this giddy and excited was when I was a smitten teenager over a girl that I'd met at junior high. I knew I felt a similar way to this woman that I'd met by chance at the dental surgery. I was ushered to a table by a very petite, plump Italian woman with a round face and bright rosy cheeks, who couldn't speak a word of English. The table I had booked was in the far corner of the restaurant, so that me and Carol could have an opportunity of getting to know each other better without being disturbed. I was determined to focus on this woman all evening and to get to know all about her. After waiting for a full 40 minutes, I thought I'd been stood up by Carol, and then there she was, rushing towards my table, completely breathless.
Oh, I'm so sorry for being so late. But someone ran over a poor dog in the road and just bogged off. Can you believe that? I witnessed the whole thing.
Carol shook her head furiously, with a disgusted expression upon her face.
Some irresponsible, self-centered driver didn't care to slow down. And they were driving in a residential area. It really sucks.
Oh dear, I said sympathetically. Did the dog die by any chance?
No, thank God he's all right. The dog only suffered a fracture in its left leg, I think. I picked him up myself and took him straight to the emergency vet. That thankfully is open for 24 hours. I think the dog is suffering from shock more than anything else. The poor thing looked so affrighted. He was shaking like a leaf. His name is Beano. I know that because he has a name and contact number on the collar. Thankfully, I was able to call the owners, and they were in absolute shock, for they hadn't noticed their dog had gone walkabout. I think the owner accidentally left a gate open. They were so dismayed to learn about Beano's fate, that he'd been run over. So he's in surgery right now, even as I speak. I hope everything's going to be all right, but I spoke to the vet, and he's optimistic that Beano's going to make a full recovery. I do wish that people would take due care when they drive in residential areas.
It was in that moment I learnt that Carol was a woman of extreme compassion. She had a very big heart on her, and I found that extremely attractive. I remember staring at her with wide eyes, as if I thought she was the most beautiful creature I'd ever beheld, and in my eyes she was just that. I could see her refined qualities, that she had, were things that I lacked in my own personality. Carol's golden blonde shoulder-length hair tumbled over both sides of her pretty face, while her big blue eyes were so spirited, so full of life and energy. I knew in that quintessential moment that I wanted this incredible woman to become my wife one day, and from that moment on we became pretty close to inseparable, and we couldn't get enough of each other. A year later we were married. Me and Carol were happy for at least 8 years of our marriage, but then she began to distance herself from me, and that was when I suspected she was having an affair. I contacted a private investigator, a man called Zach Rossenberger. After I found the attorney's card in my wife's wallet, I needed to know what Carol was getting up to, whether she was seeking a divorce behind my back in order to marry someone else. It would certainly explain her insouciantly detached behaviour towards me over the last couple of years, that had changed as dramatically as a tap turning from hot to cold. At one point in time the fire in our marriage had been burning bright, like an unquenchable inferno, as we couldn't keep our hands off each other. But now the embers were icy cold, cruel and remote, as if we were two passing ships in the night that barely even got to acknowledge each other. By all accounts it would appear my wife Carol couldn't bear to look at me any more, and when she did, the expression on her face betrayed her full revulsion, as if she'd just stood on a pile of dog turd. Seeing her attitude towards me change from a wildly hot summer to a cruel icy winter had made my heart become leaden and heavy. I felt as if I was losing my wife, not to a terminal illness, of course, but to something far worse. She was falling out of love with me, and it felt as if my ego had been severed and severely crushed. Ostensibly, I was now doing a whole lot worse than that shattered Ming vase of hers, which she seemed to prize a whole lot more than her marriage to me. If my wife treated me half as well as she did some of her prize antiques, then I'd be a happy man indeed. I instructed Zach Rossenberg to follow my wife, because I unequivocally knew she must be having an affair. I mean, why else would she push me away all the time, if there wasn't someone else waiting in the wings for her? When I first married my wife Carol, I had wholeheartedly, rather foolishly believed that she was a loyal person. But obviously I stand to be corrected, for not everything is what it seems. Let's just say it would appear that Carol's loyalty is rather selective. When I observed her dressing up this morning, she looked as if she'd stepped out of a bandbox, and in the past she was extremely happy to go to that antique shop in town, casually wearing a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt. So I knew something was up. Now she looked as if she was preparing to step down the red carpet in Hollywood. My thoughts suddenly went back to my wife's boss, Travis Mason, who was 20 years her senior. Of course I was suspicious of Travis. even though if my wife were to be interested in him, in a romantic capacity that is, she'd almost certainly need her head examining. I needed answers to all these questions that were whirling around in my head like a cyclone, which was why I contacted Zach Rosenberg in the first place. I will admit I was a tad apprehensive of what he might find out about my wife, but I had to know what was going on. Zach Rosenberg looked like one of those very distinctive Jewish rabbis, with a long, full black beard. He prided himself in being extremely professional in his job. I remember he looked at me under the umbrella of his bushy eyebrows that so very desperately needed a trim. His brown, bird-like eyes peered at me from behind round spectacles, but they didn't appear to miss a single beat. And I knew at once, based on his shrewd demeanour, that this was the man for the job, the man that I wanted to discreetly follow my wife around, to see what she was getting up to behind my back, and who the hell she was seeing. Mr. Rosenberg cleared his throat and said, "You want me to follow your wife around, is that right, Mr. Butler?" "That's right," I said. "I think she may possibly be having an affair, and I need to find out who the bugger is so I can kill him myself." "I understand you feel very heated, Mr. Butler, but let's calm down, shall we? And not get too overexcited. A lot of people think their spouses are having an affair, you know, Mr. Butler, but it doesn't always mean that they are right. Some people have been pleasantly surprised to discover that their instincts were wrong, and that their marriage was just going through a so-called bad patch. What makes you so very sure, Mr. Butler, that your wife is cheating on you? Have you got any evidence to make you reach such a conclusion?" "My wife doesn't touch me any more. I can't remember the last time she told me that she loved me. She used to hug me all the time. She doesn't do that any more. She rolls her eyes when I talk about anything, and obviously distances herself from me. I want to know what's going on with her, Mr. Rosenberg. She has been seeing someone else, I'm sure of it. Or why would she reject me like this? I haven't let myself go, have I? I'm a reasonably good-looking man. I keep myself in excellent shape. So why should she shun me like this? It makes no sense to me at all." "What you say is true, Mr. Butler. But women can be enigmatic creatures, you know. Believe me, I know. It's taken me a lifetime to understand my wife, and I'm still learning. Relationships are tough, Mr. Butler. How can you be sure your wife is cheating on you? If she's distancing herself from you and rolling her eyes when you speak, maybe she's not happy in her marriage with you. But it doesn't mean she's cheating on you." "She is cheating on me. I know she is," I said adamantly. "I need some evidence, Mr. Rosenberg, to prove that this is going on behind my back. She used to wear jeans and sweatshirts to work. She'd leave the house looking extremely casual. Now she doles herself up to the nines, as if she's secretly trying to impress someone. An admirer, perhaps, or someone that she's been seeing. This behaviour has never happened to her before. Well, I will admit that dressing up glamorously, after being significantly carefree about your appearance, can be a bit of a red flag, but it also might be extremely innocent. Some women like to revamp their wardrobes, like to make themselves look a bit more glamorous. Is there anyone you think she could be having an affair with, perhaps? Is there someone you might have in mind? I find many spouses who suspect their partner is having an affair are often suspicious of someone they actually know." I thought about Mr. Rosenberg's words, and then I said, "Well, my wife works at the old antique shop in town, for the owner, a man called Travis Mason, who is 20 years her senior. I never thought she'd be interested in the likes of him. He's a real eccentric, you know. I'm not kidding when I tell you he dresses as if he's living in the 1800s. But my wife is forever singing his praises, and I think she likes his unorthodox manner. Even her own mother thought that Travis Mason was much more suitable for her than I ever would be. She was hopeful her daughter would marry an arty-farty type, with his head full of stars and absolutely nothing in his bank balance. All my wife's previous boyfriends were carefree nonconformists, if you know what I mean, Mr. Rosenberg. You would think that any self-respecting parents would be pleased that their daughter had found a man that could offer her a secure standard of living. But not Carol's parents. I don't think they've ever liked me. I'm not stupid. I've been a real estate agent for a long time, and I can pretty easily pick up on body language, and I can see their contempt for me in their eyes. They treat me nicely enough, but they do it for my wife's sake. But I think if they were to see me outside my wife's life, they would never even make an effort to befriend me. Interesting, said Zach Rosenberg, taking down a few notes. Anyone else you think could potentially be having an affair with your wife? Think about this very carefully, Mr. Butler. There may be someone you could have overlooked. Anyone. Well, I did find a card for a psychologist in my wife's wallet. The name on the card was Terry Wallace. Now, I don't know if she's seeing Terry Wallace on a romantic capacity, or if she's going to him to talk about her miserable marriage to me. Miserable, Mr. Butler? You think your marriage to your wife is miserable? You said it, not me. Well, of course it's miserable, Mr. Rosenberg. She won't even touch me these days. There was a time when we couldn't get enough of each other. Interesting, said Mr. Rosenberg, taking down yet more notes. It seemed interesting was the only word he kept using to describe my relationship with my wife. Is there anyone else, Mr. Butler, that your wife could be seeing? I know this is a sensitive subject to address, but we have to get to the nuts and the bolts of everything, as I'm sure you fully appreciate. Of course I do, Mr. Rosenberg. That's why I came to see you in the first place. Well, I have been snooping around in my wife's purse, and not only did I find the name of a psychologist in there, but I also found the name of an attorney. The man's name was Rorris Mecker. I did some research on him. I found out he specializes in divorce. So as you can imagine, that freaked me the hell out. But I also wondered if your wife was seeing Mr. Mecker on a romantic capacity. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Butler? That's right, Mr. Rosenberg. That's exactly what I was saying. Well, I'll get answers for you, Mr. Butler. But I hasten to tell you that my investigations do not come cheap. I'm thorough in everything I do. But one way or another, I will find out whether your wife is cheating on you or not. I don't mind what it costs, Mr. Rosenberg. I need answers, and I need them now. My wife is up to something. I know she is, and I mean to find out what it is. It was 2 weeks later when Zach Rosenberg got in touch with me to tell me he needed a chat in regards to my wife, and I was to meet him at his offices as soon as possible. I was very anxious when I arrived at his offices, but sometimes you need to face the truth, no matter how brutal it is. Who is he? I asked Zach Rosenberg. Who is my wife seeing? She's seeing a psychologist, said Zach Rosenberg. I knew it, I said. I knew it. I'll kill the man myself. How long has this been going on for? Mr. Butler, you've got me all wrong, said Mr. Rosenberg. I said your wife is seeing a psychologist. It's a woman called Terry Wallace. And so unless your wife is that way inclined, if she's bisexual, which I very much doubt, nothing is going on between the two of them. Your wife visits Terry Wallace on Tuesdays and Thursdays for an hour's appointment every time. My guess is she's got some issues she needs to address with Mrs. Wallace. I did some investigation on the woman and found out she's 30 years older than your wife and has 3 grown-up children. She's a happily married woman, so we can cross her off the suspect list. Well, that's a relief. Terry Wallace is a woman. To think I never even considered that for a moment, I said, wiping away the perspiration that had gathered on my forehead with a handkerchief. It was rather unusual for me to sweat like this, but it was happening right now because I was worked up into a frenzy about what Mr. Rosenberg would tell me, as I visualized my wife sneaking around with another man. What about Travis Mason? I asked. Did you get any dirt on him? Are he and my wife canoodling together? Mr. Travis Mason is as clean as a whistle, said Mr. Rosenberg. I followed him around for several days, you know. You're right, he's definitely an eccentric, but he's also a happily married man, who does dress as if he belongs to another time. But maybe he feels it's fitting to dress like he does, given the shop he owns specializes in antiques. I met him myself when I was looking around the lovely shop. It's got so many collectible vintage pieces, you know, many that my wife would really like, so I better not bring her anywhere near that shop. I found him to be a very eloquent and very charming man. He certainly does not come across as the type that would ever consider cheating on his wife. Actually, he was telling me about his wife, Polly, how he met her at church when he was only 18 years old, and how they've been in love ever since. I knew it, I said happily. It confirms my suspicions that my wife isn't having an affair with Travis Mason. I mean, he is 20 years her senior. But I think he's always been very good friends with my wife. They like each other a lot, and they enjoy each other's sense of humour. But I'm very relieved that nothing is going on there. So who is he? I demanded to know, my breath becoming almost raspy. How long was Mr. Rosenberg going to take to finally get to the point, I wondered. I felt as if I was trying to extract blood from a stone. Your wife has been seeing that attorney. Oh, my God! You're telling me she's seeing Rorris Mecca, the man that drives the white Rolls-Royce? He's not that bad-looking either. I've done my research on him, you know. He's certainly a very wealthy man. How long has the affair been going on for? My blood was now boiling at this point. I could feel my heart thundering through my chest, and my forehead was beginning to sweat profusely again, and I had to wipe away the sweat with a handkerchief. I knew I wanted to kill Rorris Mecca. How dare he lay a finger on my wife? How dare he? You misunderstand me, Mr. Butler. Your wife is seeing Rorris Mecca, but not on a romantic capacity. I don't know how to tell you this, Mr. Butler, but your wife is seeking his advice in regards to making inquiries about pursuing a divorce with you. I gather she's keen on serving you with divorce papers. She's put it on hold for a while, but what I can gather is she seems to be very keen to go through with it. But I don't know why. I'm not privy to all those details. I did, however, manage to get some inside information about the matter, using a few of my tricks of the trade, you could say. And let's just say it seems your wife wants out of your marriage. She wants to divorce me? Are you kidding me? She wants to divorce me? Bloody cheek. So who is the backstabbing prick then? Who is she cheating on me with? I wish you would tell me, Mr. Rosenberg, instead of keeping me in suspense like this. I hope you found out who he is, because I will kill him. Mr. Butler, please, will you calm down? You'll give yourself a heart attack if you carry on this way. Your wife is not cheating on you. That's what I've been trying to tell you. She's been loyal to you. I've followed her around for many days, and it's been pretty boring, let me assure you. She hasn't got any dirty secrets. I think she's just unhappy in her marriage with you. And it looks like she'll be serving you with divorce papers sooner or later. That's all I know, I'm afraid. When I learnt this, I was absolutely furious. There was no way on God's earth my wife Carol was going to divorce me. That was not going to happen. I was certain that the private investigator, Zach Rosenberg, was wrong. He hadn't been doing his job properly. I had overestimated his ability. My wife was cheating on me. Of that I was in no doubt. But Mr. Rosenberg had not been discerning enough to get to the nuts and bolts of my wife's infidelity. Had the investigator ever stopped to consider that she could be on one of those dating sites and was possibly having an online relationship with someone? But whoever he was, if I ever found out his name, he was a dead man walking. But right now the focus needed to be on my wife. I was waiting for her to come home on this Thursday evening, when the antique shop closed at 8, but she was certainly taking her time about it. I called her up and asked her where she was, because I'd been waiting an awfully long time. And I'm not exactly a patient man by any manner of means, although I am used to people messing me around as a real estate agent, because it goes with the territory of my job, I'm afraid to say. "Where are you?" I screamed down the phone, in a less than agreeable tone of voice, as despite what Zach Rosenberger had conveyed to me about my wife not seeing anyone, I wasn't going to buy that for a single second. I wasn't stupid. My wife was clearly seeing some fancy man behind my back, and was now intending to divorce me and humiliate me by serving me with divorce papers. And let me tell you, that was not going to happen.
Calm down, Hamish. What on earth is the matter with you? It's Thursday night. You know I work late on Thursdays.
Not this late. You've been gone for ages. Where did you say you were? How far are you from home?
I'm on that terrifying, treacherous cliff road. You know the one. I can't remember the name. But it's that perilous ribbon of road right on the edge of the cliff, with that huge steep drop. I'll be home in 10 minutes, but I need to concentrate on my driving. I don't want to go over the cliff's edge, do I? Why are you so concerned anyway? You're not normally bothered about what time I get home.
Have you forgotten the day? Have you, Cupcake? I said, emphasizing the cute name I used for her.
What day is it exactly? My wife asked me.
It's the anniversary of our first meeting at the dentist's office. You mean to say you've forgotten about it?
Oh, is it? Said my wife. We've never celebrated that anniversary before. Why now all of a sudden?
You mean you've forgotten? I said, emphasizing the hurt in my voice.
Well, I'm so sorry, Hamish. I had no idea it mattered so much to you.
But of course it matters, Cupcake. Everything that concerns you matters. We are celebrating, a very special time in our lives. I've prepared a wonderful surprise for the both of us. I want to celebrate us and the 10 years of happily married life we've had together.
How lovely! How very thoughtful of you, Hamish. I'll be back home soon,
came my wife's unenthusiastic, rather aloof response.
Oh, my God! I don't believe it!
What is it, love?
There's a woman lying in the middle of the road. I'd better get out of my car to help her. I think she might be the victim of a hit and run. I'm not sure if she's even alive. Oh, goodness gracious me, I can't believe this is happening.
I could hear my wife's car grinding to a perfect stop, and I was certain I could pick up her anxious breathing. Don't do it, Cupcake. You mustn't get out of your car. You must come home right away. You can call the police when you get home. I don't like you getting out on a very treacherous road like that. You're on the cliff, remember? It's not safe.
I'm very well aware of that, Hamish. Of course it's treacherous. I'm on the edge of the cliff, and it's extremely windy out there. But what kind of a human being would I be if I left this woman to her own devices? I need to see if she's all right, if I can possibly help her in any way, if she's still alive. Because if someone drives up this high incline at a faster speed than I do, they might actually run her over, and then she'll definitely be dead. I'd blame myself if I didn't help her. I haven't got a choice in this matter.
I sighed, knowing there was nothing I could do. My wife was stubborn like that. I told her I'd stay on the line for her. But the line went static, and I never heard from her again. Her car was found abandoned on that cliff road, with a very precarious drop, and her keys were in the ignition. And, of course, it was left just abandoned. A year later, the police still couldn't find answers, as no body was ever recovered at the bottom of the cliff, apart from my wife's red windbreaker. It was assumed my wife was dead, but others believed she had staged the whole thing and had disappeared into the sunset to begin a new life of her own, a life without me. I remember being left with a feeling of great displacement, as I didn't know what had become of my wife, and her face would regularly haunt my nightmares every night, because I so wanted my lovely wife back. But where was she? No body had ever been found. What had become of my sweet Cupcake? Was she even alive, I wondered?
Carol Maxwell. The woman in green is leaning towards me as I talk to her about my life. She always peers at me rather curiously, behind the rims of her rather avant-garde green spectacles that really bring out the brown and hazelnut green hues of her pretty eyes. She asks me so many questions. She knows so much about me, when I know absolutely nothing about her. I've been visiting her every week on a regular basis, most usually on a Tuesday and Friday, on my lunch break at work, when my boss at the antique store where I work generously gives me time off. He's a good man like that. My psychologist is a woman called Terry Wallace. She believes I have a lot of toxic emotions stored up that need to be addressed and finally purged in order for me to see the light, whatever that is supposed to mean. I guess what she's trying to imply is that once I've been talking about my feelings enough, that I'll be able to make sense of the enigmatic conundrum that has become my rather mediocre, nondescript life of late. Maybe all this talking and soulful reflection will make me understand myself a whole lot better. These weekly rendezvous with my psychologist have cost me a pretty penny, let me tell you, but my boss keeps assuring me that I will never regret these sessions. I think I'm getting a lot out of them, you know. I feel a whole lot more in control of my life. So in one way or another, they appear to be working, because I desperately need to navigate my way through the ambiguous, misty blur of my life, to see the way ahead of me more clearly, and hopefully get an idea of what the future might hold for me. I've been pleasantly surprised with how really good it feels, and how liberating it is to talk about my true feelings, and to be transparently candid about everything going on in my life. Thankfully, there is no judgment or condemnation behind the four walls of my psychologist's office, which has become for me a place of refuge. Mrs. Wallace is a discreet professional who is clearly passionate about her job. She hangs on to my every word, as if everything I say really matters a whole lot, which makes me think that the things going on in my life aren't insignificant after all, and do matter. Mrs. Wallace has assured me that whatever we may discuss together will remain confidential, and that is exceedingly reassuring. I've never known Terry Wallace to wear any other colour but green. I asked her about it once. She told me that green is the colour of life, a combination of yellow and blue, representing energy and vitality, yet serenity and peace at the very same time, a perfect balance of emotions. She's unorthodox like that, and so when I met her I knew we were going to get on famously. I've always been drawn to unconventional people like that, whom don't conform to society's stereotypes. I'm not talking about weird, rebellious, antagonistic types of people that hang around all kinds of institutions complaining about everything political, with huge irate banners expressing their extreme indignance towards society. And some of these people cross boundaries and become extremely violent. So in my view, those are seriously psycho people that I would have nothing in common with at all, unless of course they were fighting for a worthy cause, not something blown out of all proportion, making a mountain out of a molehill for no reason. I'm talking about regular fun-loving people who have quirky personality traits that I find endearing. It's very important to resonate with your psychologist, and I think that I certainly am comfortable talking to Terry Wallace. She's a glamorous, very well put-together woman that smells of lilac soap and talcum powder, which is exceedingly reassuring for me, as my grandmother used to smell exactly like that. Mrs. Wallace is in her late 60s. She has a full head of curly grey hair that looks as if it's set and styled by a hairdresser every 3 days, so she takes extraordinary good care of her appearance, and I guess my husband would approve of that. Mrs. Wallace wears green nail polish and green eyeshadow, which serves to accentuate her brown bird-like eyes, that always seem to be interested in anything I have to say, which is the quintessential reason that I enjoy coming here. Who would think one would actually enjoy talking about yourself and your feelings with a psychologist? But I promise you, I really do. It was my boss at the antique store where I work, Mr. Travis Mason, who is also a very close beloved friend of mine, that saliently recommended I came to see Terry Wallace. as he's known her for an exceedingly long period of time, and claims she really knows what she's doing. I had confided in Travis about the dysfunctional, rapidly deteriorating state of my marriage, which, if it were a house, it would likely be bulldozed at once, for everything with me and my husband is falling apart at the seams, and I certainly don't know how to fix it, and I'm not sure I want to either, as trying to fix me and my husband Hamish would probably be a lost cause. I told Travis I wanted out of my marriage. The trouble with Travis Mason is he is forever the peacemaker. He would make a perfect pastor. I know he even saved his own daughter's marriage from falling apart, and based on what he's told me about his daughter and her husband, they're happier than ever. I understand his daughter went to see Mrs. Wallace, who I call the woman in green, and she was able to see the faults in the marriage that rested with her, and she needed to fix some of the things about herself to make her marriage work, which she did, and she's never been more in love with her husband as she is now, and vice versa, it would seem. She realized that you had to work at marriage, just like you do at anything in your life, or it will likely crumble in your hands like a cookie. It was Travis who persuaded me that before I went running to my attorney, Rorris Mercer, to get some divorce papers prepared to present to my husband, that I should at first proceed with due caution, as maybe it was not a divorce I needed. Maybe there was some brokenness in me that I needed to fix first, before I could ultimately fix my marriage to my husband Hamish. Travis believes people are too quick these days to get divorced, and sometimes we should work on ourselves and our marriages in order to be happy. I am open-minded about such things, and given Travis has saved his own daughter's marriage from imploding, maybe his salient, sagacious advice might save my marriage. But sadly, I think my marriage, like the Titanic, has hit an iceberg and is sinking, and nothing or no one can rescue it from its desolate, watery grave. Travis may be a man of very few words, who looks like he stepped out of the 1800s. He wears the most fabulous top hats you've ever seen, and very elegant tails to work. But when he told me to take things cautiously one step at a time, I was quick to listen to him. He assured me that we're all broken in some way. Most people have had a few bumps in the road, and those bumps can bring us down. And it would be better for me to fix myself before I was quick to abandon my marriage in haste, as I might find myself later repenting at leisure. I thought Travis was right on this, as over the years that I've worked with him at the old antique store in town, I have found Travis is always proven right about so many things. I think there is a small part of me that might possibly still love my husband Hamish, but the trouble is I'm desperately struggling to find that love, and I'm wondering if it exists at all, as right now not only do I not appear to love my husband, but I would go so far as to say I intensely dislike him.
So are you saying, Mrs. Butler, that you think your husband, Hamish, deliberately broke your Ming vase?
The woman in green asks me, her eyes fixing on me steadily, when I tell her about the incident that happened recently.
You yourself say that the vase in question was on the entrance hall table. Most people are profoundly aware that the entrance hall can be a precarious place of high traffic. People coming in from the cold weather outside, taking off jackets and boots, throwing them around the place, dogs racing to meet their owners enthusiastically with wagging tails. And believe me, dogs can do a great deal of damage with their tails, knocking things off tables and so forth. Isn't it possible that your husband Hamish brushed past that Ming vase and knocked it over accidentally? Why are you so sure he did this on purpose?
My husband likes to hurt me, I tell the woman in green. He actually derives pleasure from making me suffer. I know he does. I can see it in his expression.
What makes you say that, Mrs. Butler?
She asks. Her brown eyes watch me shrewdly from behind her green glasses. He always likes to hurt me, Mrs. Wallace. He gets off on it, I'm telling you.
But, Mrs. Butler, couldn't it have been an innocent accident, perhaps?
Well, it could have been, Mrs. Wallace, but I'm not so sure, you know. I suppose I should give Hamish the benefit of the doubt on that one. Let's just say there was such a smug look of satisfaction on his face when I got down onto the floor on my hands and knees and painstakingly picked up the pieces of my Ming vase. I loved that vase, Mrs. Wallace. It was worth a lot of money. I saved up for it for months. But it can't be salvaged. Even with superglue, the whole thing is shattered into thousands of tiny pieces. A bit like my marriage to Hamish, you could say.
You do know, Mrs. Butler, that hurt people often hurt people. If your husband deliberately broke the vase, maybe he's battling some inner demons of his own. Have you thought of that, perhaps?
Well, I suppose that's true. I hadn't thought of it like that. But anyway, I don't think anything could hurt my husband. My husband, well, I don't know how to say this to you, but he's got the hide of a rhino. If you stabbed him with a knife 1,000 times, he probably wouldn't feel any pain, I said rather sarcastically.
That's not necessarily true, Mrs. Butler. I think all people can hurt, and some people can take the hurt very deeply, even though they don't show it at all. Some people are very good at pretending they don't care, or that nothing gets them down. But in my experience, that is all a front. Do you believe your husband is aware of how unhappy you are in your marriage with him, Mrs. Butler?
Well, my husband's not exactly the brightest brick in the block, Mrs. Wallace, I say reflectively. But he really would have to have the sensitivity of a gnat not to know that I'm unhappy in our marriage. I would have thought it was blindingly obvious to him. We hardly ever talk these days. We engage in absolutely no conversation between each other, apart from trivial day-to-day stuff like, "How was your day?" and "Oh, did you pick up any milk from the store?" Stuff like that, if you know what I mean. And then I always pull away from him in our bedroom. We haven't touched each other over 2 years, you know. And when I say touched each other, I'm not just talking about intimate stuff that goes on in the bedroom between a husband and wife. In truth, that's neither here or there, is it? I'm talking about what really, really matters in relationships. The everyday expressions of love, so to speak, when couples express their deep affection towards each other, like kissing each other lightly on the cheek, or giving each other a big encouraging hug. I mean, I can't remember the last time Hamish hugged me, or brought me flowers, or the last time I picked him any buns up from the bakery, and he's always loved cinnamon buns. Those kind of things haven't happened in yonks, you know. I can tell you, Miss Lewis, we don't even acknowledge each other's birthdays or Christmases anymore. We haven't bought each other gifts in 2 years or so. Think about that for a moment. It's not normal, is it?
You're right, it's not normal. So why, Mrs. Butler, is there such a burgeoning disconnect between the two of you?
The woman in green asks me gingerly.
I agree with you that bedroom intimacy is one thing, but those affectionate moments when a couple expresses love towards each other during the day, in the little, very special things they do for each other, are significantly much more important. A hug there, an encouraging nudge there, a light-hearted laugh, a joke that you share together. So why have you not enjoyed any of these loving gestures you would expect to see in a marriage? Why do you think things have got so bad between the two of you? What went so badly awry? Things don't go pear-shaped without good reason, Mrs. Butler.
I shudder as the woman in green asks me this question, because even just thinking of my husband touching me again is an intolerable thought. The woman in green is as sharp as a hawk. It's like she can read my thoughts. Am I really that transparent, I wonder?
Whose fault is all this?
She asks me, with a look that suggests she already knows the answer to my question. Well, her question, actually, but wants me to confirm it to her, and acknowledge that I've played an intrinsic role in the downfall of my marriage. She probably wants me to own it and take responsibility for what I've failed to do and accomplish in our marriage, in order to make it work. And she's right. A lot of the blame does rest upon my shoulders, but with good reason, I assure you. The woman in green then says,
I put it to you, Mrs. Butler, that one of you in your relationship must have started being aloof and indifferent towards the other partner. So someone started the ball rolling in this absurd direction that leads to only one thing,
A catastrophic implosion in a marriage. I'm sure you agree with me on this, Mrs. Butler. A marriage cannot survive a lack of emotional intimacy. Something's invariably going to give, is it not?
Well, it's my fault if you want me to say that.
Well, me and my husband fell apart, didn't we? But you know that already, don't you? I say to the woman in green, who nods her head. I'm the one that pulls away from my husband, but I can't help it, can I? I hate him so very much. Hate is a very big word, Mrs. Butler, and it might surprise you to know that hate is very passionate. But I'm not taking anyone's sides on this, as you know. I'm the casual observer here, just pointing things out to make them clearer to see. Things you might possibly have overlooked. On your husband's part, your pulling away has got to have hurt him a whole lot. Every time you flinch at his touch. Well, that's going to be very painful, and he's going to be decidedly aware of that, is he not? Your husband may be many things, Mrs. Butler, but I'm quite sure he's not stupid.
I suppose so, I admit, making a contorted face. But I told you I can't help the way I feel.
And why is that, Mrs. Butler? Why is it you cannot bear for your husband to touch you? When did these feelings first start? They sound rather irrational to me. I mean, every married couple goes through precarious challenges in a marriage. But you need to learn to overcome them. You should never allow a few nonsensical things to drag you down, and to steal away the promise of a bright future that you and your husband Hamish could potentially enjoy together. It takes two people to make a marriage work, you know. So the big question I need to ask you, Butler, why are you the one that has built up a brick wall against your husband? He must have done something very, very bad to really upset you, for you feel so hostile towards him. These feelings are not like fungi. They don't erupt for no good reason, do they?
That's true, I admit, to the woman in green. I think about Mrs. Wallace's question for a brief moment, and I realise she's absolutely right. As my mushrooming hatred that I feel towards my husband happened 2 years ago, when he betrayed me in the worst possible way imaginable.
I want you to relax, Mrs. Butler. Take in a deep breath. Here, take this brown paper bag from me and blow into it for a moment. Nothing is that bad. Your face has gone very red and puffy, Mrs. Butler. You look decidedly angry. Something your husband Hamish did obviously upset you greatly. Tell me what it was that made you feel so antagonistic towards him.
Well, I got very upset when I told him I wanted a baby. He had agreed when we got married we'd have children. We talked about it often enough. We both agreed we wanted 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. We even discussed names for these children, and from the moment we got married, we started trying for a baby. Well, at least I thought we were trying at the time, but I stand to be corrected on that one, as the only one that was trying appears to be me. I was so eager to become a mother, and I felt sure Hamish was equally as enthusiastic about becoming a father.
So your husband also wanted children, Mrs. Butler, is that right?
Well, yes, I thought he did at the time, but more fool me. I was absolutely devastated when nothing happened, and that pregnancy test after pregnancy test confirmed that I was not pregnant. My husband suggested it was all my fault, and that likely I was infertile. He took me lovingly into his arms when I cried into his shirt. And then he went on to say that he didn't care if we didn't have children because he loved me so much, and it didn't matter at all. But I remembered he seemed pleased, as if we'd both agreed that we weren't going to have kids after all.
Well, if he said that, it shows he really loved you, didn't it? Given he initially wanted children, but he didn't care if you couldn't fall pregnant. A lot of men might have been resentful if their wife wasn't able to have children for them.
Well, at the time it was reassuring to hear him say that, I do admit it. It made me feel wanted and loved, regardless of what the future might hold for us. But what my husband failed to understand at the time was that I would have quite literally moved heaven and earth to have a baby. And if the worst came to the worst, I would have even considered surrogacy or adoption.
I went to visit my gynecologist, as you do, and after many tests, he confirmed to me that there was no reason I couldn't have children. He said he believed I was very fertile, and he would be exceedingly surprised if I didn't fall pregnant. He suggested that the infertility problem in our relationship may not be mine at all. He has said that there were a lot of men these days, due to bad diets and so forth, that were suffering from low sperm counts, that could potentially be the source of the problem.
So I hope you told your husband about the gynecologist's findings, Mrs. Butler. The woman in green asks me.
Of course I did. I told this all to my husband, and he said the gynecologist was wrong. There was nothing wrong with him.
I can assure you I've got an excellent sperm count,
he told me. He was so arrogant and opinionated, and it made me as mad as hell. He wouldn't even dare consider changing his diet to improve our chances of getting pregnant. He was mulishly stubborn, very uncooperative, and extremely indifferent about the whole thing. It was like he didn't care a jot, and that made me furious.
Oh dear, that would have been very discouraging for you, I'm most sure, that your husband was failing to admit that he might be the reason why you failed to conceive. I guess you must have resented him. You were eager to have a baby, and he wasn't addressing any of these issues which were very important to you at the time. He didn't want to admit that he may be the root cause of the problem.
Oh, you better believe it, I resented him. Hamish didn't want to admit he had a problem. I think being a red-blooded man who has a high opinion of himself, any suggestion that he might have a low sperm count would be demasculating for him. I was trying to encourage him to get a check-up, but he refused to budge on that one. One day 2 years ago, it was after years of trying for a baby, I was looking in the desk for our passports, as we were going to Portugal for a couple of weeks. I was ever so excited about the trip. I'd never been to Portugal before, you see. I wanted to make sure that everything was in order, so I decided to check that our passports were still valid, because I wasn't sure if they were. And that's when I found them. And when I did, my blood went icy cold. I just froze to the spot. I was in such shock. I nearly walked out on my husband then and there. That's how infuriated I was. The woman in green looks at me with wide eyes. Her curiosity is palpable. She leans forward. Her nose twitches like a mouse that has found a stack of delicious cheese to dig into, that she simply cannot resist or refuse.
So tell me, Mrs. Butler, I'm intrigued. What did you find?
I found some medical papers concerning a recent operation that my husband had had, without my knowledge. That's when I realised that within weeks after we got married, Hamish clandestinely went off to have a vasectomy. I knew nothing about it. I mean, why would he do a thing like that, without even letting me know, given we both wanted children?
Why do you think he did that, Mrs. Butler?
Says the woman in green, twisting the green pen in her hands around and around. And in that moment I realised for the very first time that everything in her office is green, and I can't believe I didn't notice this before. Was I really that unobservant, I wondered. I guess it means he never wanted any children, so he lied to me. So how can I trust him any more after that? How could he do such a cruel thing to me? He knew how much I wanted a baby. It was like he thrust a knife into my chest and twisted it around and around hundreds of times over, to make the pain even more unbearable.
But why would he lie to you about his vasectomy, I wonder?
Asked the woman in green, as if she might have the answer for me. So I wait for her to expand on what she's about to say, when I realise what she just said is a question that is directed at me. I don't know, I said. Why would he lie to me about something like this?
I can't answer that question for you, Mrs. Butler. But tell me this. Would you have married your husband Hamish if you had the slightest inkling that he was not interested in having children with you?
Absolutely not. I wanted children over and above anything else in the world, and he knew that when I married him. I made that very clear. I still do want children, very much, and I'm still young enough to have children, so it's not too late.
Perhaps, Mrs. Butler, your husband knew that you wouldn't have married him
if you didn't have a family together. Have you ever thought of that possibility? Perhaps he really didn't want children. Some men don't, you know. But he wanted you and wasn't willing to give you up. So he chose to be rather dishonest about how he really felt about becoming a father.
I hadn't thought of it like that, I admitted. So Hamish manipulated me all along, didn't he? He pretended to be interested in having children, when he really wasn't. He just wanted me all to himself. He never wanted kids, just like he doesn't want animals. I've been asking him for a dog since we first got married, and he always says, "Now's not the right time, love." I don't think my husband likes children, nor does he like animals, and there are many people he doesn't like either. Now I come to think of it, he's a bit antisocial, even though he works as an estate agent. So I rather suspect he gets to meet a whole lot of people. I think he likes to have all the attention focused on himself. In my husband's world, it's me, myself, and I, you could say. As I say this, the frustration and anger I feel seems to intensify when I realise the full spectrum of my husband's deception. Is it any wonder I hate him?
Did you not confront your husband about these medical notes you found, Mrs. Butler, concerning the vasectomy he had?
The woman in green asks me.
Surely you communicated your frustration with him, and how aggrieved you were that he'd lied to you all along. It was important for you to have children. Everybody knows that communication is extremely necessary in a relationship. Without it, you're very much on a sinking ship. When couples don't communicate, all hell breaks loose, let me tell you. Believe me, I know all about it. I hope you spoke to him about this.
No, I didn't say a single word. You see, I know Hamish all too well. He'd make it all my fault. My husband's very good at doing that kind of thing, twisting things to make it look like I'm in the wrong. He'd probably say, "Well, I told you I never wanted kids," and stuff like that, which he never did. But he's a very good liar. I was so angry and livid for weeks on end. I wouldn't let him touch me after that. I guess that was when my aloofness towards Hamish really set in. And now I quite literally hate him.
You hate him because of the betrayal, is that right? I'm not taking sides, Mrs. Butler, with your husband. But doesn't everyone at least deserve a hearing? Maybe your husband Hamish had good reason to have a vasectomy.
The betrayal is disgusting. My husband is a very selfish, self-centred man. And believe me, the only reason he had a vasectomy is because he didn't want to have children. He knew I'd never marry him if I couldn't have a family. He's always wanted to control my life. My mother always believed I'd made a big mistake marrying him, and it turns out she was absolutely right. My voice is now elevated and almost squeaky, as the anger I express is very discernible.
But you did love him once, Mrs. Butler. I'd like to remind you of that. It's very important to remind people of that because they're quick to forget what is obviously staring them in the face.
I nodded. That is true. We were wildly in love, until we weren't, until I found out what he was really like. I feel as if our marriage has been a sham, a big, total and utter sham, a complete farce, you could say.
How did you both meet, Mrs. Butler? You've been coming to my office for many weeks now, and yet ironically we haven't discussed this yet. I'm intrigued as to two people who are polar opposites, how they came to be together. Don't get me wrong, some relationships where people are exceedingly different, like chalk is to cheese, can really work, you know. But over the weeks you've been telling me about the type of men you used to date before you married your husband. It's almost like your husband Hamish is very ordinary by contrast to the men of your past, that by all intents and purposes sounded rather colourful, if you don't mind my saying so.
Well, you're right about that. When I brought him home with me and announced to my parents that this was my fiancé-to-be, they did a double take, let me tell you. My poor mother was in shock. So was my father, but they tried to hide it well. But I wasn't fooled. I guess they thought I'd bring a mad poet home, but not someone like Hamish.
What did your mother have to say about Hamish when she first met him?
I chuckle as I remember my mother's shocked reaction when I introduced Hamish to her, especially given he was wearing a suit,
and looked like a trussed-up Thanksgiving turkey. Well, she didn't like him very much. She never said that to me, of course, because she's far too polite and diplomatic for that. But I could tell by her body language that she didn't warm to him at all. And I know Hamish picked up on my mother's aloofness towards him, as he told me he knew my mother didn't like him at all. I think he was quite hurt by that, and rightly so.
So how did you meet? You never said, Mrs. Butler.
Well, in a dentist's office, if you must know. Not exactly the most romantic place. He was obnoxious when I first met him, and I hated him on first sight. That should have probably sounded a warning bell to me. I remember he accused me of taking his seat in the dental reception area. How childish can you get? But when I realized he had an abscess on his tooth, I was able to forgive him rather easily. I mean, I know how cantankerous people can be with pain in their teeth. Some people say it's worse than giving birth. And let me tell you, when my sister gave birth to my little nephew, Tommy, every word that came out of her mouth would have made a sailor blush. It was pretty obnoxious, let me tell you. She even called the midwife that was helping her deliver her baby an ugly old hag. But that was all forgiven and forgotten after Tommy was born. Even the midwife was grinning like a Cheshire cat and telling my sister she was such a trooper and had been so brave. I remember apologizing profusely to the midwife on my sister's behalf about all the nasty names my sister had called her. I was embarrassed by the filth that came out of my sister's mouth. She's normally the most beautiful, very sensitive, sweet person. The midwife told me she had been called much worse before, and that people can spew a lot of hatred when they're in pain. I decided if the midwife could easily forgive my sister, I could forgive this cantankerous man that I'd met in the dental surgery's reception. I was the one that took the initiative and phoned him, after he left his phone number with the lady at reception. But I always remember wavering about making that phone call, in the first place, because of how rude the man had been on our first meeting. But it wasn't only that. Deep down in my gut, I guess I always just knew. The lady in the green leans forward. She fixed her beady, rather intense gaze on me.
You knew what, Mrs. Butler?
Well, I guess I knew when I made that phone call that our paths would always be linked in some way. I mean, my husband was wildly attractive in every sense of the word, but he was absolutely not my usual type. He was too trussed up for me, far too formal, if you know what I mean. But there was something about him that drew me right in. There was definitely sparks there.
In what way did you find your husband attractive?
The lady in green asks me. Well, they say there's a thin line between love and hate, don't they? I tell her quite candidly. Ostensibly, both create a passionate response in a person. If I had been apathetic when I first met my husband, I'd have probably easily given him up my seat at the dental surgery. But his abrupt, offensive manner stirred up something in me that rarely made me react, because I wanted to fight back. So I became almost rebelliously antagonistic. I guess there was a small part of me that was stirred up by him, as I'd never met anyone like him before.
Well, that brings me to my next point, Mrs. Butler, which I keep trying to remind my clients, as I will you. You loved this man once, did you not? You found him, you said yourself, wildly attractive. When you first met, you couldn't keep your hands off each other. So what changed? Was it after you discovered he'd gone and got that vasectomy that turned you right off him? Was that when you reached the point of no return, and decided from thenceforth that you would build a non-penetrable wall between the two of you? Is that what you think happened?
Well, that played a huge part in it, obviously. But I guess the man that demanded my seat from me in the dental surgery was the man I realized I had married all along. Someone completely bankrupt of emotion. Someone who is clearly a narcissist.
You think your husband is a narcissist, do you, Mrs. Butler?
Pretty much. I mean, I'm not a professional, am I? So I can't actually diagnose him. But I do know that a narcissist is a person that only thinks about themselves. They only care about themselves. Their egos are just enormous, and nothing else matters. One thing about my husband is he has a monumental ego, let me tell you. Well, people with narcissism have an exaggerated sense of self-importance. They display feelings of what is known as grandiosity. They lack empathy and always feel entitled. That's my husband to the T. He's exactly like that. He must be a narcissist. Tell me, Mrs. Butler, do you think if you were to communicate a little better with your husband Hamish, tell him everything you've told me, including how you know about his vasectomy, said the woman in green, that maybe you could get past all of this? Or do you think that that is an impossible feat to overcome? Are you kidding me? I say defiantly. How can I ever get past this? Number one, my husband lied to me when we first got married, and that's a big deal. He pretended he wanted children, so that I would agree to spend the rest of my life with him. Number two, he made me believe that there was something intrinsically wrong with me when I failed to fall pregnant. And you have no idea how many times I brought pregnancy tests and how many times my hopes were dashed and defeated. I'd sometimes cry myself to sleep every night. I was that distressed. And did my husband care a jot? Absolutely not. Number three, I find out that he had a vasectomy without my knowing. So that means the trust literally fell apart in our marriage. The moment I was privy to this information, I'd had enough, let me tell you. Well, in my experience, Mrs. Butler, secrets do have a nasty habit of coming out, says the woman in green. That's my experience anyway. And secrets very often destroy marriages. That's why it's always important to be an open book with your spouse. Well, my husband's secret has certainly destroyed my marriage. How could I possibly spend the rest of my life with someone as treacherously dishonest and deceitful as he is? When I first married him, it was on the understanding we would have children together. He broke that promise by lying to me deliberately. The man has never allowed me to even own a dog of my own, and I guess I've allowed him to dictate how things pan out in our household. I should never have allowed that to happen. I'm going to stand up for myself from now on. I've allowed that man to bully me for long enough. There's nothing remotely redeeming about my husband. And no, I can't get past this. And more to the point, I won't. I don't like my husband. He has no sense of humour. He's incredibly boring, and he can't be trusted. Isn't that enough to prove to you that we would never work out long term? But, Mrs. Butler, you were saying your husband was extremely good looking. I think wildly attractive was the words you were using. And from what you said, physical appearances appear to be very important to you. I stare at the woman in the green with wide, indignant, almost disbelieving eyes. Good looking? I scoff. Sure, he's good looking, and he knows it too. But in my eyes, he's the most unattractive man I've ever met. Beauty comes from within, you know, Mrs. Wallace. Oh, I believe that, Mrs. Butler. Beauty does come from within. So tell me, what do you intend to do? In this session, you've been telling me everything that is wrong with your husband. Can you tell me anything that is right about him? Beyond the fact that he's wildly good-looking, of course. I'm silent for a long time, as I ponder over this question, and then I look directly at the woman in green and say, No, there's nothing I like about my husband, not a single thing. So then what are you going to do about it? I open up my purse and get to my wallet, and I pull out the attorney's card from the wallet and throw it towards the woman in green. That's what I'm going to do, I say. The woman in green picks my card up and studies it. Who is Rorris Mecker? She asks me, raising a quizzical brow. But I'm sure she can see by the attorney's card that Rorris Mecker is an attorney. He's my attorney. I visited his offices before. They're not far from where I work at the antique shop in town. He's a very nice man, you know. He specialises in divorce. He doesn't come cheap. So yes, I've decided I'm going to divorce my husband. That's what I'm going to do. You sound very decisive, Mrs. Butler, as if you really do know your mind, which is a great change. But are you sure you want to do this? Yes, I'm absolutely sure. In our conversation together today, it's really opened my eyes. There is no possible way I can continue my relationship with my husband. We simply cannot go on."
"Well, good for you then. I think my sessions have obviously helped you find out what it is you really want, Mrs. Butler. I wish you all the best for the future," says the woman in green. "And if you ever need to talk to me again or discuss anything else that is bothering you, don't hesitate to contact my offices and arrange a further appointment."
When I left Terry Wallace's office, I was practically floating on air. These sessions had helped me unequivocally to find out what it was I really wanted with my life. And although I knew I wanted a divorce from my husband, Hamish, the difference was I was now presented with no wavering doubts. This is what I really wanted to do. But I certainly doubted my husband Hamish would want any of this, despite the indifference we had towards each other. My husband would not take kindly to being brushed aside like this, or presented with divorce papers for that matter. I hurriedly crossed the street to make my way to my red Peugeot that was parked on the opposite side. I could see the man with the dark beard again. He looked distinctly like a Jewish rabbi. He appeared to look at me very furtively, through dark eyes. And when I looked straight at him as if to say, "What the hell is your problem?" he hurriedly looked away. Not him again, I thought, feeling ever so slightly indignant. If I wasn't mistaken, he seemed to be following me around for quite a few days now. I turned around to look directly in his direction again, and thankfully he had scuttled away like a dung beetle. But everywhere I appeared to go, I always seemed to be seeing this man, in my peripheral vision. Was he some kind of weirdo that had developed a fixation on me, like those stalkers you hear about that follow celebrities around? Please God, no, I thought. The last thing I wanted on God's earth was a stalker, thank you very much, or a wacko man who had developed a crush on me. I shook away the unpleasant thoughts from my mind, like the hairs on a dog's coat. Once I made my way back to the antique store. There was my boss, Travis Mason, standing behind the counter. At the time he was sifting through a box of antique treasures that an old lady had brought into the store after her sister had died, and some of the rare relics were worth a bob or two.
"You're back early,"
my boss said, looking up at me.
"How did your session with Terry Wallace go?"
I sighed happily. It was my last session today. I didn't even know it. But she told me I can contact her any time I want to in the future. But my decision has been reached.
"Your decision has been reached?" said Travis, looking at me in surprise. "Good Lord, are you sure? Does that mean what I think it means?"
If you mean, does it mean that I'm going to try and amend my relationship with Hamish, the answer is absolutely no. I'm going to be filing for divorce.
"I'm very sorry to hear that," said Travis, looking melancholic. "I really did hope you could figure things out."
Travis, you can't save the world, I teased. You might be able to fix your daughter's marriage, but you can't fix mine that easily. Me and Hamish, well, we're not really suited to each other at the end of the day.
"I'm sorry to hear that, love," said Travis, giving me a big, genuinely warm hug. "But you're going to be all right, aren't you? You do look as if a weight has been lifted off your shoulders, I have to admit."
Thanks for asking. I'm going to be absolutely fine. And it's a good way to put it. I do actually feel as if a weight has been lifted off my mind. I've been to see my attorney several times, to discuss divorce with him. But I put that on hold. But now I definitely want to go through with it. But thanks to you, I had my hand on the pause button for a while, and I don't regret that for a second. I'm grateful you encouraged me to see the woman in green, because let's just say she helped me see my way clearly, through the fog, and so now I'm switching that button on and going ahead with the divorce, because I know unequivocally it's the right thing for me to do.
"So how are you going to broach the subject with Hamish as tactfully as you can? I can see he's quite an egotistical man, and I'm not very sure he's going to take the news well. Whatever you may feel about your husband, he is definitely fixated about you."
You never told me that before. You think he's fixated about me, do you?
"Well, it's not something I've ever cared to discuss with you. But he's always struck me as the kind of man who thinks he owns you, like he owns a house and a fancy car. I can't imagine he's going to take the news well. When are you going to tell him?"
"Well, I'm working late tonight, aren't I? But when I get back home, I'm going to tell him then. Wish me luck. I'm really going to need it. I'm terrified to tell him my real feelings on our relationship. But I've got to do it. I've got to pluck up the courage and face him."
"Of course you can do it, but rather you than me," said Travis.
I was working late at the antique shop that evening. Travis Mason had long since gone home, although he'd begged me to allow him to stay, because he felt I needed his support and comfort, but I insisted he returned home to his wife and family. I worked late every Thursday night, when our doors closed at 8 p.m. But I was lingering around longer than usual, procrastinating and finding all kinds of other things that needed to be done. I really didn't want to return home to tell my husband I wanted out of our marriage. Eventually I knew I couldn't postpone the inevitable, so I found myself travelling down the country roads that would finally lead to my home. At one point I was very nervously driving up the steep mountainous incline, where a treacherously high cliff fringed the edges of this ribbon of road. So this drive at night was very dangerous and precariously terrifying, to say the very least. The high mountainous cliff dipped down to a sizable drop, to a thick valley below, completely overgrown with burgeoning forests and waterfalls that seemed to stretch out for an eternity. Everyone knew that this was the most dangerous stretch of sequestered country road, and most would wisely avoid it if they could, but I didn't have a choice in the matter. My husband had never liked me taking this road at night, as the visibility was dramatically reduced. If that was not bad enough, people had fallen over the cliff to their deaths. Some people had come to this country road with that purpose in mind, for it was the perfect place to commit suicide. I was exceedingly nervous of heights, so when my car climbed up this high incline with its steep drop, I always tried to focus ahead of me, keeping my eyes pinned directly on the road ahead of me. If I dared to even stray and look towards the edge of the cliff, I would probably lose my nerve. It was quite dark that night. The wind was pretty bad, and there was a pronounced chill in the air. I was used to driving at night, down lonely country roads like this, but it always bothered me when I took the road up the cliff. But tonight the atmosphere was more tense than usual. I could have cut it with a knife. I knew, of course, the quintessential reason why I was feeling so on edge. It was perfectly natural. I was about to tell my husband I wanted a divorce, and I knew he wouldn't take the news terribly well. My cell phone rang, and I could observe on the caller ID that it was Hamish. Talk of the devil. Even though I was driving up the steep incline, I knew my husband was phoning me, and was wondering where the hell I was. He probably wouldn't be impressed that I was running so late, so I thought I'd better tell him I was nearly home.
"Hi, Hamish, is that you?" "Of course it's me, love. Why the hell are you running late, Cupcake? What is keeping you? You should have been home a half an hour ago."
"I'm sorry, Hamish. You know what it's like at the antique shop on a Thursday night. It was busy, let me tell you. And our last customer, well, she refused to leave, didn't she? All she could do was talk about her late aunt."
"You do realise, Cupcake, what day it is? Or have you forgotten? Don't tell me you've forgotten. You haven't, have you?"
"Forgotten what?" I said, my mind a jumble of what it is that I could possibly have forgotten.
"You mean you've forgotten the anniversary of when we first met at the dental surgery all those years ago? Today is the anniversary of that special day. So I've arranged a special dinner for you at home, and I don't want it getting cold."
"Sounds perfectly lovely. How thoughtful of you," I said. "I'll be back home soon. I'm on that cliff road."
"Drive carefully, love. That's one of a hell of a dangerous road, you know it is."
"Oh, my goodness, I don't believe it," I said, stopping the car at once.
"What is it, Cupcake?" came my husband's voice.
"There's a woman lying in the middle of the road. I think she's been badly hurt. She's not moving. Oh, my word, I've got to get out to help her."
"Don't do it, love, under any circumstances, you hear me? Don't you dare get out of the car. Come home at once. We'll call 911.
I can't leave her like this. What kind of a human being would I be if I ignored the poor woman? I need to see if she's all right.
I don't think that's wise, love. I really don't. That's a very dangerous stretch of road, and it's very windy tonight. Don't get out of your car. Come home at once.
I didn't listen to my husband. I gingerly climbed out of my red Peugeot. I hurriedly ran over to the woman in the middle of the road. My heart was galloping violently in my chest. I was absolutely terrified of what I might find. I'd never seen a dead body before a day in my life. But the woman with her head buried into the road didn't look like she was breathing to me. This was the worst place to find someone lying in the middle of the road. The road was on the edge of a steep cliff, and if I looked down towards the huge drop, I'd probably lose my nerve. Get a grip, Carol, I told myself. If this woman is still alive, she needs immediate help. And if she's dead, I'll have to call for help, as I couldn't possibly leave her like this. I left my engine running, and my headlights glared through the dark, foggy night, like large tiger's eyes. I could see the woman's blonde hair tumbling over the road in a flop of rather flat curls. She was wearing a flowery dress that looked strangely familiar. I was sure I had a dress like that somewhere, and a red windbreaker that looked distinctly like mine. I ran towards the woman and dropped onto my hands and knees as I earnestly leaned over the body. "Are you all right?" I asked, reaching out to grab a hand that was cold and hard and unmoving. The woman appeared white and drained of all colour, and almost as if she was plastic looking, as her eyes just stared out into the night. And then I discovered to my astonishment that she was no more than a mannequin. She'd certainly had me fooled. Was this some kind of weird joke? Then there he was, stepping out into the middle of the road in front of me, caught up in the penetrating, cruel glaze of my headlights. It was my husband, Hamish. What on earth was he doing here? Were my first thoughts.
Oh dear, Carol. I did warn you, did I not, that it wasn't safe to get out of your red Peugeot when you're on a cliff's edge, on a windy night such as this? I mean, anything could happen to you, couldn't it? You could be blown off the cliff's edge to your death, could you not?
Hamish, what the hell are you doing here? Did you put the mannequin in the middle of the road like this? Is this some kind of a macabre joke? Because if it is, I am not laughing. I don't find this remotely amusing. What kind of game are you playing?
Cupcake, you want to talk about games, do you? You're the one that has been playing games, not me. I've been having you followed, so I know all about what you've been getting up to behind my back.
You've been having me followed? By a guy that looks like a Jewish rabbi, is that right?
That's right, he looks just like a Jewish rabbi. He's a private investigator, and I've learnt that you're planning to file for divorce with me, and that you're seeing a fancy man behind my back.
The private investigator is lying to you in that case, because I'm not seeing anyone behind your back. I cried out indignantly, realizing how precarious my position was, for my husband looked like an untamed tiger that was so furious I wasn't sure what he was about to do, but I could guess. He lunged towards me. I let out a shrill, ear-piercing scream, and the next thing I knew, I went rolling down that cliff, and with a desperate hand, I managed to grab a rock that was jutting out of the cliff, and I held on to the thing for dear life, knowing that it would soon give way, my hand that is, because there was only so long I could hold on to this rock. I could see Hamish standing at the edge of the road, looking down on me. "Please help, Hamish!" I cried out. "Please help! I can't hold on to this rock for much longer. If I fall down the cliff, I'm going to die. Please help me, Hamish."
That's the whole idea, Cupcake. I think you better say your prayers, as no one will be here to rescue you.
My husband turned around and walked away, and then I heard an engine firing up and finally driving away. I knew I couldn't last much longer, dangling from a rock like this, holding on to it for dear life. My fingers were already slipping, and when I looked down at the rocky incline, I was terrified, for I knew I was already dead. And then it happened. A massive blob of black, very ambiguous blob of black, hurled itself towards me. I let out a shrill scream, but I still held on to the rock. But I was lifted up into the air like magic, thrown over a pair of ponderous shoulders. And then whatever this thing was, it was running down a cliff face. I mean, who can do that? As if it was nothing. This was a precarious drop that would have killed people instantly, but not this thing, whatever it was. I could feel the rise and fall of this thing's very robust, gigantic chest, and I could smell the earthen scent of its long dark hair. What the hell was going on? What was happening to me? I had almost made peace with my imminent death, and now I had been abducted by a massive creature, covered with long flowing dark hair. It was all so surreal. I felt as if I was ensnared in a nightmare, of which I couldn't escape. But I knew that this was no nightmare. This was real. My husband had tried to kill me tonight, and if it wasn't for this big blob of black, I'd be dead by now. But was its intention towards me as insidious as my husband's had been? I closed my eyes as this thing, whatever it was, carried me down this treacherous stretch of rugged terrain. This thing, whatever it was as nimble as a mountain goat. Finally, with great relief, we were travelling on flatter, much safer ground, obviously through the woods, because I could feel the trees surrounding me on every side. That was when I had the courage to open my eyes. I could feel the wind whipping against me. It was cool in the woods, and so incredibly dark that I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face, as no moonlight filtered through the trees to subdue the tenebrific density of the night that seemed heavy and cloyingly impenetrable, like a very thick winter coat. But this thing, whatever it was that was carrying me, didn't appear to be intimidated by the lack of visibility. Perhaps it had night vision, I thought. I remember the creature put me down on the ground, in an open clearing, where the moonlight filtered through the trees. It was in that moment that I got a full view of this creature. I realized to my total astonishment that I was staring at a Bigfoot, and the next thing I knew, I was caught up in his gaze. I remember him saying to me in my head, "Have no fear, I'm here to help." And after that I felt as if I was drifting off into a deep sleep. I had a profound sense I was being carried somewhere. I heard a mumble of strange voices, talking in a peculiar language, but everything was so nebulously vague, so indefinite, like when you're coming around from a deep anaesthetic, and yet you still can't break through that veil of consciousness to reach a more aware state of mind, so to speak. Hamikati, ha kilana, ha sakwashi. It was all so incredibly ambiguous. I remember the feeling of being rocked, as if I was travelling over a great distance, in an unconscious state. And that was when the first light of the new morning appeared to break through. I found myself on the side of a road. I woke up feeling disorientated and confused, and then I saw the Bigfoot again. I remember he told me in my head not to fear, but I was too scared to look into his eyes again, lest I should fall fast asleep. But I heard the Bigfoot say to me, in a strange language that was translated into English, "There are lots of cars that come down here. You will find help here." I realized then that the Bigfoot had actually saved my life on the night my husband had tried to kill me. I turned around to thank him, but he had already glided away. 1 year later, Hamish. A year had gone by, and there was no news as to what had happened to my wife, Carol. Her red Peugeot was found abandoned on the cliff road, with the keys still in the ignition and the door wide open. That was the route she'd invariably take to get back home. The police were very sympathetic about my plight at first, and told me the cliff is extremely formidable, and only a very skilled athlete could get down that cliff on their own. Most would not survive such a drop. They asked me if my wife had been suicidal of late, and I told them on multiple occasions that she had talked of ending her life, but I'd never thought that she'd meant it. The officer in question had given me that "are you kidding" kind of look, as if he thought if my wife had mentioned that she wanted to commit suicide, as a dutiful husband, I should have taken her claims extremely seriously, for it meant she had reached a very low place in her life. Of course, on my part, that was rather an artful lie, in order to allay any suspicions being directed at me, for I certainly wasn't going to have the finger pointed at me for being the quintessential reason that Carol decided to end it all. I was glad that they were pursuing that misleading narrative, as I am told that the police always look to the husband as being the prime suspect in any kind of investigation where a death is involved, especially a close death. But they saw what had happened to my wife Carol, with her car abandoned like that, as either a dreadful, very unfortunate accident, or an attempt on my wife's part to take her own life. By all accounts, I'm definitely not going to admit to my part in all of this, especially as my wife deserved everything she got, although right now I don't know what that is, as her body was never recovered. I was the one that threw the red windbreaker the mannequin was wearing to the bottom of the cliff, as it had belonged to my wife, and is what she would have ultimately worn on a windy night. The police found the windbreaker, but they never found Carol's body, not even a shoe that she could have been wearing. The police officer interviewing me about my wife reassured me that many a lost soul had jumped over that cliff to their death. He asked me if I could think of anything that might have pushed Carol over the edge to make her want to end her life like that. Did I know what the source of her great grief and depression was? And of course they asked me numerous questions about the state of our marriage. I told them exactly what I wanted them to know. I told them, like all marriages, we had our ups and downs, but on the whole we were extremely happy together. I told the officer that my wife wanted a baby very, very much, but sadly, no matter how hard we tried, she simply failed to get pregnant, and it didn't help that the biological clock was ticking. I told him that I guess she realized the time was running out, and that she'd never get to be a mother. I assured him that this had distressed her greatly, so much so that she'd cried herself to sleep almost every night. It's all she ever wanted, I told him. A baby, I mean. The officer looked very sympathetic. Well, I guess that might have pushed her over the edge. We did find her red windbreaker at the bottom of the cliff, but we found no sign of her, Mr. Butler, I'm afraid. I think it is safe to assume that your wife Carol is deceased. Maybe wild animals dragged her body away, for there are no remains to be found. The police contacted my wife's parents, who failed to contact me to express their condolences, which I felt was absolutely appalling, although I did get a funny note from my wife's mother, saying that there would be a memorial service for my wife, of which I would not be invited. Some of the locals who had heard about what had happened to my wife expressed their deepest sympathy towards me, which was jolly good of them. There is one thing, however, that keeps me awake at night and tortures me a lot. What if my wife Carol is still alive? Because her body was never recovered, and there have been cases of people who have managed to get down that cliff. I still am haunted by that night that I pushed her over the cliff edge to what I believed would be a certain death. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm a monster, aren't you? But despite everything you may believe, I still loved Carol very much. But she was the one that decided to ruin everything for us. We had such a great relationship, until she tried to turn on me like a rattlesnake. I miss her, of course I do, as without her there is a huge emptiness in my life. But I was not going to allow Carol to humiliate me, not under any circumstances, by filing for divorce. If she wanted rid of me, it works both ways, does it not? I knew that I had to get rid of her first, to save my dignity, which is what I did. I still remember Carol climbing out of her car on that tumultuous windy night, where it was blowing very vigorously, let me tell you. My wife was a very slim woman, who could easily be blown over,
if she wasn't careful, and she was terrified of heights, and not at all nimble. She told me that lonely cliff road she took every night, up that mountainous steep incline, scared her half to death. But I knew my Machiavellian plan would absolutely work, because if my wife saw anything lying seemingly wounded in the middle of the road, from an animal to a human being desperately in need of help, she'd have got out to help them, as she was always selfless that way. I'll never forget the way she looked at me when I stepped out into the middle of the road, and she realized my guileful plan had all been a set-up, and that there was no escape for her. It was so easy to just tip her over the edge, but when she fell, she grabbed onto a rock that was jutting out of the ground. She held on to that rock for dear life, but I knew she wouldn't be able to last very long. But I'm still so bothered by why her body was never recovered, and because of that, I sometimes toss and turn in my bed at night, and I'm regularly haunted by images of Carol. If I could have changed anything that night, I would have stood there on that cliff road, watching my wife lose her grip as she held on to that rock, and finally her fingers slipped, and she took the nasty fall to the valley below. Of course there have been people who've managed to climb down that cliff, but those are intrepid adventurers who know exactly what they're doing. But Carol, not Carol, she couldn't survive that steep drop, or could she?
Carol, after that treacherous night when Hamish tossed me over the cliff, as if I was no more than an old apple core he wanted to dispose of, I'll never forget how he so cruelly turned away, while I clung on to that rocky appendage that jutted out of the ground for dear life. But I knew I couldn't last very long. I knew I would lose my grip, and then I'd fall to my imminent death. My adrenaline had been coursing through my system so powerfully at the time that it gave me a supernatural strength I didn't even know I had. I looked up at my husband pleadingly, with terror in my eyes, begging him to please help me. But he insouciantly just turned around, and as I say, he walked away. How heartlessly cold do you have to be to do a thing like that? I guess my husband just couldn't handle the fact that I wanted to divorce him. So yes, he is obviously a narcissist. I remembered praying to God for help. I knew I was about to meet my maker, and I hadn't even started living yet. Moments after I prayed, a miracle happened. This Herculean, ambiguous blob of black that was not exactly discernible threw me onto his shoulders and glided down the cliff with the agility of a mountain goat. Looking back, I do wonder how anyone could possibly climb down that cliff, but the Bigfoot did, and how he did I don't exactly know, but a large part of me was so caught up in the bubble of my terror at the time. I guess I tuned out as to what was going on. I was sure in one way or another I was dead. I had no idea whether the thing rescuing me had an insidious agenda towards me, and at the time I didn't know what the hell it was. I could hear the thing breathing and occasionally grunting. And when I finally realized that this creature was a Bigfoot when he put me down, I was so astonished. I have not thought about cryptic creatures before. The very idea that they might exist in North America had never once entered my mind. But this powerful, extraordinary creature unquestionably was real. I think the Bigfoot hypnotized me, because most of my memory was a foggy blur, until I found myself on a road a long way from home, where there were several cars that passed that way. The Bigfoot was standing there, and he told me that I could wave down a car and get the help I needed. And before I had an opportunity to thank him for what he'd done for me, he had all but glided away, and that is something I deeply regret. I would have liked to thank him because he saved my life. I do not know how he got to me in time, or what on earth he was doing on the cliff in the first place, but I'd rather not think about things like that. But I do know that God uses the most unlikely of angels to rescue us. For that night my prayers were well and truly answered. I know many people say negative things about Bigfoot, but this highly intelligent human-like creature saved my life, and without his marvellous intervention, I know I would be dead. I wisely never told anyone about the extraordinary Bigfoot that saved my life, not even my own parents, because there's some things you don't share. But let's just say nobody understands how someone such as myself managed to survive a fall from a great height without being injured or without any broken bones. When they ask me to fill in the blanks about what really happened, my excuse is, I can't remember. And that isn't actually a lie, because there's so many things about that night that I genuinely don't remember. Ask anyone who's been in a near-fatal car accident, and you'll find many of the details of what happened that night, or that day, whenever the accident occurred, for them are ambiguously obscure, because our mind blanks out things we don't need to remember, probably for our own mental well-being, I rather suspect. I do remember I stood on the side of the road, waving down a passing car, and that good, kind Samaritan stopped and allowed me to use their cell phone. I called my sister who picked me up, and I told her and everyone close to me what had happened with my husband, and how he had tried to kill me that night. I told my parents, and of course my very good friend and employer, Mr. Travis Mason, so they all knew exactly what was going on. The first thing my mother said to me was, "I knew the man was a narcissist from the very moment I laid eyes on him. He needs to go to prison for what he's done. I hope they lock him up and throw away the key forever." Of course I wanted Hamish to be charged at once for attempted murder, but I had other plans in mind. I called the police and told them I was very much alive and well, a couple of days after my car was found abandoned on that cliff road. I told them I didn't want my husband to know about my whereabouts, or that I was actually alive, as he was abusive towards me. They asked me if I wanted to file any charges against him. I told them I needed time before I did that, but I would be laying charges when I was good and ready. I wanted my husband to be looking over his shoulder every single day of his life, wondering and worrying if his wife had survived that nasty fall. As some people have survived that drop, because they were nimble enough to navigate their way down to the bottom of the cliff. But such people, let me tell you, are few and far between, and are probably extremely good athletes. The police, after much persuasion, never updated my husband to tell him that I wasn't dead, while my parents informed him they were having a memorial service for me, but he was not invited.
Hamish, life has not been easy this past year. Wondering what happened to my late wife. I hate the not knowing. It really bugs me. If there was a body, there would at least be confirmation that she was dead, but her body was never recovered. When I go to bed at night, it is her face that haunts my deepest nightmares, and sometimes I even wake up in pools of sweat. I did contact the police a couple of times to ask them about the investigation, and I think they said something to me about it being closed, which was a huge relief to me. I figured out they assumed my wife had taken her own life, but with no body to bury, there can be no funeral, and the only memorial service Carol had was organized by her parents, who simply refused to invite me to the ceremony, claiming that their daughter had never been happy in her marriage to me, and they wanted nothing to do with me. I guess they blamed me for what happened, and believed I made their daughter so miserable that she chose to take her own life. I guess some people are thinking that, but I'm not going to let that get to me. Life is too short for any regrets. So what's the point of having any? Sometimes when I'm out on the street, doing my shopping in town, I will see someone that rather reminds me of Carol. I will draw in a deep breath and wonder, is it her? And then the woman in question turns around, and I'm heartily relieved to see that that is not Carol. I woke up this morning with a bitter taste in my mouth. It was as bitter as gall, I have to say, and a heavy feeling in my heart, an ominous feeling. I have an appointment with a client this morning called Mrs. Carmen Karma, who wants to see a house that I'm trying to sell. She's seen the house online and likes it very much, but she wants a personal viewing. So I'm on my way to meet with this woman, but something feels so off this morning, and the sour taste in my mouth refuses to abate. Why do I have a prognostic feeling today that it's not going to be a good one? I just don't know.
Carol, this is the day of my grand entrance, the day when I get revenge on Hamish. I've been to the police, and I've told them all the details concerning my near miss with death, as my husband attempted to murder me. But I told them I needed to have fun with him first, and thankfully they agreed. I've made an appointment to see him. I'm pretending to be a woman called Carmen Karma. The surname Karma, well, speaks volumes, doesn't it? As my arrival on the doorstep of this home will bring the karma that Hamish well deserves, for he is about to be arrested for attempted murder, as the police are in on this charade with me, and I'm grateful for their support. As I drive up to the house, I can see my husband's BMW parked outside the modern property. This is the kind of house that Hamish would have loved us to live in as a married couple. He could never understand my fascination for all things romantically antique. I'm wearing dark glasses and a dark wig, and I'm heavily pregnant because I've been artificially inseminated with another man's sperm, so my very extended stomach is practically bursting out of the maternity dress that I'm wearing. I'll be having a baby in due course, so my dreams in becoming a mother have finally been realized. I'm very doubtful that Hamish will see through my crafty disguise, until of course I pull off the black wig and remove my dark glasses, and then he's going to have the shock of his life, and I simply can't wait to see the horror on his face when he realizes the terrifying truth that his wife is alive and well, and that his dirty laundry is fully exposed. Hamish eagerly comes dashing down the formal steps of this modern home. He's wearing a bright smile on his face. I notice his eyes go straight to my extended pregnant belly, as it's the first thing people tend to look at these days when they see me. It's surreal to see my husband again, but I'm glad he doesn't appear to recognize me at all. My disguise is obviously very good. My husband hasn't changed at all. He's as good-looking as he always has been, but I do notice, rather pleasingly, some dark circles under his eyes. Maybe he's been having quite a few sleepless nights over the last year. Perhaps he's had nightmares of tossing me over the cliff to my death. Or maybe he's worried that I'm not dead at all. He's about to find out the terrifying truth, and I'm sure when he sees me in the flesh, he'll never sleep well ever again. Hamish is wearing an impeccable navy blue suit that fits him seamlessly like a glove, along with a crisp white cotton shirt and a very smart red and blue tie. I notice his leather shoes, as usual, are so shiny you can practically see your face in them.
Hello, Mrs. Karma. I'm Hamish Butler. Very delighted to finally meet you,
he says, reaching out to shake my hand. I take his hand in mine. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm so very glad you're going to show me around this property today.
I'm very delighted to do so, ma'am. I didn't actually know you were pregnant. When is the baby due?
Very shortly, I say. I'm in a hurry, of course, to find the perfect home.
But of course you must be. Let me show you around. You are going to be delighted. This place is perfect to raise a family.
Hamish, I say, removing my dark glasses from my face and tossing the dark wig to one side so that it drops to my feet, so that a tumble of golden curls suddenly appears that I know he's going to recognize. He'll be in no doubt as to who I am. Hamish stares at me for a long moment. His eyes widen in absolute disbelief. He's looking at me as if he's seeing a ghost. His face has grown so white, and he's trembling like a leaf. I smile at him. Nice to see you, Hamish. It's been quite a while, has it not?
It's you, Carol. I thought you were...
You thought I was dead, didn't you? Too bad for you that I survived that steep drop. You underestimated what a nimble athlete I am. There are people that have made it down that cliff, you know. I'm not the first.
But I don't understand. How could you possibly survive that? It's not possible.
Why did you do it, Hamish? I ask him.
You were going to divorce me,
he says somewhat churlishly. I was going to divorce you because I didn't love you any more, Hamish. We weren't working out. And you know why? Because you lied to me about so many things. But about the most important thing to me in my entire life, and that was having a baby. And you went behind my back and had a vasectomy. That's why I wanted to end things with you. But you wanted me dead. You have heard the saying, karma's a bitch, Hamish. That's why you're meeting her today. I'm Mrs. Carmen Karma today. Hamish continues to look at me in disbelief.
My God! Oh, my God! I'm done for.
Too right you are. It's nice knowing you, Hamish. I guess meeting you in the dentist's office was a bad omen, wasn't it? The police cars arrive in a flash of blue lights, and I watch Hamish being cuffed and taken away. And I hope he'll spend a long time in prison. After my case is heard in court, of course. He intended to kill me with malice, so that should mean he'll spend many years staring at the white walls of his prison cell. I feel absolutely no pity for him, for he spared me not a moment of kindness when he threw me over that cliff. I suspect he really is a narcissist, like my mother believes. He looks at me in silence through his wide, indignant eyes that are devoid of any emotion or regret. The only regret that Hamish is likely to have is that he got caught in the first place. But it's no more than he deserves. He has read his Miranda rights and ushered away in a police car. I hope I never have to lay eyes on him again, but I'm glad he sweated like a pig, wondering if I was alive or dead for an entire year. But now he's going to prison, and I don't have to give him a second thought again. Right now my focus is on raising my baby girl. I've decided to call her Mary Bell, and Travis Mason has graciously agreed to be her godfather. My parents can't wait to be grandparents. And recently I've been seeing a lovely man who's a bit of a poetry buff, much more my type, as my mother keeps saying. So there you are. That's my story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.